Yes, there's an amendment to this amendment lodged by the Minister for the Environment, and I ask the Greffier to read the amendment to the amendment.
Replace paragraph A with the following. Within the preamble to SP2, Spatial Strategy, on page 38, after the words building at higher densities, there should be inserted the words at higher densities that are appropriate to the character of the area. B, in paragraph B, for the proposed strategic proposal 4, substitute the following. Strategic proposal 4, a West of Island planning framework and area master plans. The Minister for the Environment will bring forward a West of Island planning framework, together a series of more focused master plans for Llanelli and adjacent areas, including Jersey Airport, as appropriate, in consultation with key stakeholders, including the parish, landowners, local residents and their children and businesses. The planning framework will be brought forward first with specific areas-based master plans as necessary to follow during the bridging plan period up to 2025.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, sir. My amendment seeks to change policy SP2. It seeks to change the preamble. So this is page 38 in the draft island plan. And just to explain what the preamble is, it isn't actually the policy statement itself. As I said earlier on, every word of the planning policy counts for planning decisions. But if you like, it's part of the intention and the purpose of the plan. And so this particular section is dealing with main centres. It talks about St Helier, and it talks about also does obviously deal with Llanelli, because Llanelli is already a significant centre of development and activity. And I have asked the team to put up on the screen, if they can, the spatial map, which I think will show you where that where the boundaries are. So I must admit, I do have some personal sympathy, quite a lot actually, with Deputy Tadier's proposal, being anxious about higher densities. And so I said, well, I think we should be sure that this is not just an open door to having over-the-top housing densities everywhere, because I've never personally been in favour of having a one-size-fits-all policies for developments in our built-up areas, because, as we know, built-up areas in Jersey are very varied. We have village settlements, we have ribbon development on the coast road, and we have, little pockets of development, perhaps isolated pockets around. And I think, what would be appropriate in one place is not appropriate for another. So I've asked for work to be done so that that the densities that are used of development are in line with what I certainly call the character of an individual area. So I think that fits in 100% with the idea of what is now a generally accepted concept of placemaking. Idea that all developments should contribute to a sense of place. It shouldn't be, it actually should gel and reflect what is, if you like, characteristics of the area rather than jar. It's a bit like architectural good manners. And of course, that's now, in a perfect world, we would be able to do an assessment of every single character area, built-up area character in the island, and have in place detailed guidance that replies to that, each one of those individually. We've not been able to do that. So far, the work has been done to define that in much more detail in St Helier. We engaged, I think, and you've seen the evidence base, a leading practice in this area, pretty legendary actually, William Miller Associates of Glasgow, who are experts in urban developments, who've did a wonderful, I think a really good, excellent character appraisal of the various parts of town, which will help develop those the right sort of standards and guidance. It's not just relevant to densities, but it's all sorts of things about building heights, all these type of things. There's a whole host of things that fall within. So I'd be saying I've put forward this amendment to add the words that are appropriate, higher densities that are appropriate to the character of the area. Now, I can understand why Deputy Tellier may not think that goes far enough, but I think I would point him to other parts of the plan to show what's intended. Page 182, which appears under the managing development housing policies, talks about, there's a whole set of policy preambles there, design for homes and housing density in particular. And that says that minimum density standard, this is proposal on page 182, the Minister for the Environment, that's the one in the future, will develop and publish supplementary planning guidance to establish minimum density standards for the island's built-up areas, including town, Lake Henevey, local centres and smaller settlements. If you like, those kind of four categories, and I think you can broadly categorise our built-up areas into those groupings. And of course, Lake Henevey we're talking about now. And then it says, as part of the development of any supplementary planning guidance for minimum density standards, the Minister will consult the Minister of Housing Communities. Now, I think our Housing Minister's got a major role to play in becoming much more, I think, engaged in the type of housings, design, and all the rest of it. And also, it says the relevant parishes, this is consultation, stakeholders, and members of the public. And I would just, members may say, well, there's supplementary planning guidance. What is this? Well, it's issued under the law. The Minister is required by law to consult. It's not a question the Minister just makes his mind up what he or she likes. There's a proper process of consultation and listening and in developing those guidance. So that, my intention would be, is that by putting my amendment about appropriate, it means inappropriate in accordance with that process described under page 182 proposal for housing. And then policy H2 as well. Policy H2 on the next page, 183, talks about housing density. Now there's quite a specific policy there, which sets out the various characteristics of on any individual site, which talks about the quality, type and mix of homes being created, the level of design relative to the nature of the site and its local context and characters. So I think there's a whole lot there. I ask members to perhaps read that. And it does talk about the special interest and the character of the area. So for me, I thought what the intention in this plan, and it's probably not atypical, that one could probably find a bit here where it thinks, oh, I'm not happy with that. But then what I'd ask members to do is to look where else that comes back in the plan and try and draw the threads together. And so because all those threads I've described are part of the piece in terms of how we develop areas. But why do I think that Lake Henevey now should feature in such a kind of a broad strategic approach? It's because, well, look, I think myself is that some parts of the Henevey area I think could benefit from new investment. And I think some parts of it, look, I love the parish that I live to bits, but some bits are quite sort of 60-ish. Oh, I must have pressed the apologies. And I'll start again, just for the record. I love my parish to bits, but some parts of it do need investment. And some parts of it do look very 60-ish and probably, now in order to help that happen, one needs planning policies to give some sort of encouragement. But you also need planning policies in place to enable planning committees and also parish communities. I'm passionate about community planning, always have been. And there's a real role for Conitarbs here to fulfill there. So that what we don't get is inappropriate developments, developments that are damaging. And so I think what we've got in this plan are the tools to help us do that. So that is why I'm very loath to go with Deputy Tadier's amendment to remove any reference to higher densities at all. I accept the fact that those words need properly qualifying, and I'd be asking members to link it in with what the other parts of the plan for minimum density standards, proposal and policy H2 say. So on that basis, I think that deals with the first part of my amendment. The other part is the second part about a master plan. Obviously, again, Deputy Tadier helped us out immensely here because he wisely raised the question, look, when we're looking at a place like the Kenner Bay, isn't it time we need a master plan? A master plan where, for the first time, government invests some resources and money and some effort to trying to help produce a framework for private landowners to develop their land, improve it, and provide the amenities that we want, and make sure we don't get the things we don't want. Now, trouble is, master plans, I think, because this is quite a big area, because you say it goes right up to the Jersey airport. And I personally think myself, members may not agree with me, I personally think there is probably scope for some additional land and associated with employment in the region of the airports. And I think because of reasons of sustainability. Why, I ask, should everybody have to go to work in St Helier? Why? There must be, there must be business opportunities where there could be development, employment opportunities in that vicinity. Now, that's a very big area. So to do a master plan, that is one big, huge task. So I've suggested a kind of a two-stage. And this is what the amendment does. It says a West of Ireland planning framework, which is a very high-level plan, and then we have master plans on individual part of it. And that's what it says, area-based master plans. And obviously those decisions about what those areas are will be made in consultation with the communities, stakeholders, businesses, all that, we listed down in the proposition. So I would hope, I'm with Deputy Taddy, I never want to see high volume develop, high density development everywhere in that sort of damaging way it's done, or has been perhaps in the past. It needs to be more properly managed, and what I'm hoping that members will be persuaded that my amendment offers the opportunity to provide in place the tools to do what I've said there. Thank you, sir. I make the amendment.
Thank you, Minister. Is the amendment seconded?
So, yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. So, I mean, there's clearly much that the Minister has said which I can't disagree with in terms of the words that he uses. But we've got to bring this back to the fundamental point, is that by amending my amendment, the Minister is effectively negating it. He's putting back in exactly the combination of words that I'm looking to remove, simply adding something else to it, which I'll address in a moment. And it doesn't get away from the fact that despite the words of the Minister, the fine words, that he doesn't want to see unsuitable and higher density development springing up everywhere in the Kenner Bay area, his plan and his amendment actually gives the green light for exactly that to happen. So he's actually putting back in the words that I've been seeking to remove. And the problem is, the Minister might say, oh, we don't want this to happen, I hope it doesn't happen, and I'm with Deputy Tadier, and I hope the other representatives in spirit on this one. But when it comes down to the reality, and people are now going to put in new applications for development, they can do that with the blessing of this Minister and the blessing of the new island plan if we allow this to go ahead today. Let's look at the wording of that preamble that the Minister talked about. It says, so my wording would be to encourage the redevelopment of already developed lands and buildings, it wouldn't say the higher densities. It would say by accommodating a broader range of employment and uses as such. The minister puts back in the higher densities, and he thinks just by adding appropriate character to the area, that makes it okay. Well, the problem is it's superfluous to say that it should be appropriate to the character of the area, because that's already a planning consideration. And if somebody is putting in plans which are not appropriate to the character of the area, then objections can already be raised on that basis quite rightly and quite legitimately, and that will go against any plans for development that are submitted. So I think what we've seen here is just a classic distraction, is to say, look, I don't want to see higher densities, which is what the minister's saying, but I'm being told that I have to put it in there because we need to put all these dense buildings somewhere in the island, and because St Bullards and Lekenove is already the second urban area, we're going to put lots of high density buildings there. That's our plan. There's no other way that I think this can be viewed. This gives the green light to higher densities. And if the minister was genuinely concerned, he could have said, okay, I'll accept the amendment with the addition of appropriate to the character of the area, without putting back in the very contentious element about higher densities. And this is the fundamental problem. So I urge members to reject the amendment on that basis, sir. It remains to be seen whether I'll be able to take these parts separately, so I don't know. That's something which you could advise on. It might be helpful. I don't know if you could advise on that now, sir.
Well, it's a matter for the proposer. I take it from what you've said, Deputy, that in relation to the Minister's amendment to your amendment, you oppose A, but don't oppose B. Is that right?
That's right. So I don't have a problem.
Yes. Like, I'll ask the Minister to indicate now if he's prepared to ask the Assembly to vote on A and B separately. It's a matter for him.
Yes, sir, I think it would be a sensible way forward.
Yes. So that I hopefully answers your question.
Yeah, that's helpful, sir. As long as it's in order, that's the main thing. I know
Yes,
that
it is,
procedurally
yes.
these things can, as you said, help at the beginning, can get complicated. So I do think it's important to touch on the second place, because at the second point, I think there are more than one way to get to the same. There's more than one way to get to the same place that we want to, and I think that the minister put it tactfully that whilst Lekenove is a great place for people to work and live and have their leisure time for so many reasons, because it's got everything on its doorstep, that there clearly is a feeling that there's been some neglect of certain areas. And one area I think it's worth putting on the table here when we set out the vision is that when I look at the precinct area on La Route de Kenove, where you might have seen photos in the past where it's been all sorts of things. So, of course, at one point, that's where I referred to earlier as the sand dunes extending right up to there. I've seen photos of when there were go-kart tracks, I think, and I remember, of course, go-kart tracks being over the Bellevue site before, and I could hear them certainly when I was growing up, before the social housing was up there. And I think that's clearly an area where it needs a bit of TLC, as I would call it. And we know it's complicated because it's in multiple ownership. And what I would hope, and this was the idea of having a proper master plan for the area, was to say, okay, if you're really going to consider St Bullard and Lekenove as a second hub, then you really need to provide the resources and the energy for facilitating those conversations, but also the actual money when necessary to make sure that regeneration in the area is facilitated. And I don't just mean regeneration as some wealthy developers coming in and building lots of flats, which are, shiny and new initially, but which may not going to look great in a few years' time. It's about actually deciding what kind of feel we want for that area, what should be there, and how we aspire together about making that sense of place there. And I don't see any reason why we can't see, cafes, green areas indeed. Why couldn't the precinct area If you move the parking to a different place, and this is where the frustrating things are, is that I know that conversations and the people who own it and administer that land had some great ideas for what they might do in the area, but there was a lack of interface, for want of better words, about how they might engage with the other residents, the co-owners, the tenants, and the shop owners as well, as to what that might look like. And of course, that could completely be transformed if only there was a proper mechanism and a plan around which to engage her. And that's before we start mentioning things like the old Lekeneve school site, where it has to be said, I mentioned it earlier about having things done to us as a community, that the afterthought that was given to what should be done at the old school site. So despite the many questions that I and my parish colleagues had asked in the assembly about the site, and we just see it as an afterthought that the Oberdale facilities, some of them are moved there without really any long-term planning. And of course that has a knock-on effect about what might happen for usage in the area in the future. So when we start to look at places like the precinct, like the old school, like the Communicare Centre, and think of them not as separate sites there, but actually as joined up locations which could end up having some kind of meaningful network to provide not just housing, but for the community use and for social, cultural and artistic uses as well, then I think that's when it gets very interesting, sir. And that's certainly what I've been trying to do with Part B of my amendment, which I'm happy the Minister sees that vision and shares the vision. But it doesn't get away from the fact that but that's the difficult part. The easy part, of course, from a planning point of view, is to cram the area with as much housing as possible, because that's one of the solutions. I'm afraid it's not going to be a solution, because there'll be so many downsides. It's about appropriate development, yes, but it doesn't need to be at the cost of having higher and higher densities being encouraged in the area, sir. So I do strongly urge members from all parts of the island to reject the move to try and put back in the higher densities.
Thank you, Deputy. Conor St Brelard.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to follow the Deputy. What it seems to me we're looking at is, and I'm going to speak really simply to Part A, and given that we're going to go that way, because I think Part B is quite acceptable. But in regards to Part A, we're looking at interpretation of appropriate, and that's where there is a degree of woolliness, which is does concern me. We have, sir, and I have spoken to the Minister about it, we've always overlooked the business of repeating mistakes. We don't have a mechanism to look where we may have gone wrong in the past in terms of planning decisions. They may have been made using the right policies and all the rest of it, but the reality is, and it's there for the eye to behold, they haven't worked out for one reason or another. And that leads me on to density, so particularly. One of the roles of the parish so often, and my mailbag is often filled with these things, as will be the Honorary Police, is towards densities. What higher densities does, more often than not, is cause social difficulties. The effects are always apparent in that we all want people to have accommodation, but if you squeeze people in cheek by jowl, and we don't know from the interpretation put forward whether that'll be the case, if you squeeze people cheek by jowl, there will be problems. It's first of all, it's going to be parking, and I know we'll be told that we're all getting the bus, we're all jumping on our bikes, but the reality is there will be too many cars in particular areas, and they spill out onto the main road or in front of neighbours, and the parish have to deal with these things, and it's not particularly pleasant having to do so. In terms of the analysis of the area, I know the area very well. In fact, I live on the outskirts of the Van Ten to Kenvey, but we've seen, I suppose, we're dealing with the history of development. The major part of the development in that area was done post-war, particularly 60s, 70s, with the development of, 50s, 60s, 70s, Clos de Sable first, then Kenvey Park and Don Farm Bellevue following on. The precinct has been mentioned, is now, 60 years old, and I'm old enough, so dare I say it, to having seen it before it was built. And it was open dunes, as was mentioned earlier. But we've got that development, that whole area, particularly Kenway Park, the precinct, which is almost iconic 60s. Should planning preserve that in aspect, as has been mentioned before? It's quite difficult to change it without upsetting the whole balance, I suppose, in the area. But particularly going back to the precinct, it's past its sell-by date. There's no question about it. It's managed managed locally for remote owners, and it needs upgrading. Now, how do we do that? The freeholds of the flats above the shops have been sold off. To actually get that development back on track is not easy. So those would all have to be repurchased from willing sellers, if they were to be the case. The whole lot pulled down and started again. So it's a massive, massive project. And you could argue that more density could be achieved in terms of commercial in that area for the betterment of the area. But if you look to the areas behind and towards the airport where there is significant housing, no, I don't think increased density will do it any favours at all. We've seen later in this debate, we see an application to use the fields next to the airport for a car testing centre, right on a dangerous corner. Is that correct, sir? I think not, and that'll be spoken of later. We've seen the effect of a garage development on the other side of the road, totally inappropriate for the area. It's a Milton Keynes type motorway development. How it got through planning, I've no idea. Somebody clearly wasn't thinking at the time, or maybe it was the public's fault for not picking it up. I'm not going to take, I should take some of the blame. It's not quite in my parish, so it's just over the border, but it clearly isn't working as was initially envisaged. So, sir, I think, yes, we need to provide efficient housing in terms of utilising the space, but not at any social cost. And I think we need to be very cognizant of that. We've seen also the effects of garden grabbing often takes place to the detriment of areas, cars crammed into small places once again, and we mustn't lose sight of that. So I would say that I don't know if the Minister can say, or Deputy Taylor can say, that was there a plan in the 70s for a master plan for the area? I'm not sure. There may have been. When Clodagh Harbour was laid out, when Kenway Park was laid out, was there a master plan? They may well have been. Maybe we should just be upgrading that to what we need in the 21st century. I think there is mileage for that, but please let's not get this density too great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Antab. Deputy Truscott.
Thank you, sir. And I want to start by thanking Deputy Tellier for bringing, one, the amendment, and two, for the Minister for bringing the amendment to the amendment. Deputy Tellier is absolutely right. We're two Sombrellard, effectively old boys. Perhaps Deputy Tellier, who is much younger than me, might object to the term. But yes, we both went to Lamoy School. We both attended Lekennebay, both went on to take A-levels at Holier. And we were both paper boys in the area, so we have a fair bit in common. Our politics may be different colours, but I have got to say, sir, that we are both extremely passionate and care very much for our parish, as all deputies from their retrospective parishes do. And of course, one being out west is going to argue that west is best, and that is for sure, sir. I've spent 8 years on the planning committee and really applied all the laws and rules and various other things against all applications and tried to achieve a balanced view on these things. And the whole idea of density in a built-up area is to maximise the build, really to effectively save our green fields, our very precious green fields, from being built on. And to a degree we have achieved that. And, the whole planning committee has done a great job in the 8 years, and we've protected the green zone as much as possible. Plainly, St Helier has taken the brunt of development, and I'm very conscious. We've just approved another demolition of a hotel in St Helier, and the density there is in areas becoming, really quite concerning, as I'm sure the Constable of St Helier feels. Interestingly, that particular hotel application started out with a much higher density being proposed. I think there were 90 plus apartments, and the department recommended that it should come back with something smaller. We've got 70 plus apartments now, really to mitigate the impact of such a development on neighbours and causing unreasonable harm to those neighbours. And I was pleased to say that that plan got planning approved. I just, I'm struggling a little bit here because, as the Minister quite rightly states in his report, that a lot of these things are already protected by the Island Plan. Policy SB4 protects and promotes local identity. Policy GD6, design quality. Policy GD7, tall buildings, and Policy H2, housing density. And it is a play on words in this particular case because, well, I can appreciate that we need to maximise, and we really do, if we are to say about green fields. It's the Minister's amendment that mentions, let me just go to it if I could. Where are we? He mentions the, I've lost the page, goodness me. The Minister bring forward must be kind of the wrong one. Bear with me, sir, I'm nearly there. Anyway, it's just density, or whether it should be based on character of the area. And well, the character of St Brelard is invariably low rise, low profile. So if one is going to apply that, particularly in planning terms going forward, then I think that could cause any planning committee some angst and concern. The character of the area, low rise, and it ties the hands of planners as well. I am struggling to a degree with this either one, but I am leaning towards the Ministers, in so much I think we do need to maximise, but within a reasonable way, the volume of proposals going forward, but keeping it within the character of the area. There are so many other considerations to take into account when we are developing, and I think we've missed a trick to a degree, and I think the Minister absolutely confirms that it's about amenity space, it's about provision of nurseries, it's about schooling, all those other things that the plan does pick up that we really do need to pay more attention to. So I've got to say, it's interesting to hear from other members how they feel about this, but I've got to say I am leaning towards the Minister. I think his other proposal, which is make it part of the Island Plan 2025 and more concentration and master plan in the area, probably makes sense, and it really literally is in terms of the actual time scale involved. I think 2023 to report back is a tall ask. I think 2025 would be more appropriate, which would give us all more time to actually be consulted with all the key stakeholders, the children of the area, what they feel that they want going forward in this parish. So I'll listen to the debate as this goes on, and I'll vote accordingly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Masson.
Thank you, sir. May I begin by actually thanking Deputy Truscott for his contribution. It's actually really helpful during these debates to have experienced members of the Planning Committee actually comment on the documents in front of them, because if members of the Assembly have never sat on planning committee, the actual use and interpretation of these documents and how they are weighted against the various policies within the Island Plan is sometimes sometimes almost a work of magic you can feel when members are addressing the committee. So it's useful to have that input. So what I just want to remind members of, and I assume it's Amendment 43 as amended we're talking about, sir?
Yes, the amendment to Amendment 43.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I only speak on this one. Just to remind members that in the current island plan, Deputy Le Harissier brought an amendment seeking a master plan for the Five Oaks area. And 10 years on, it's never happened. So the question I would like to put to the Planning Minister is, what assurance can he give me, the Assembly, Deputy Tadier, that the department actually has resource to actually be able to deliver this section, amended or not? Because members can spend a lot of time arguing about these particular master plan debates, and actually, do we ever actually get them? So I would like the Planning Minister to actually indicate to members what actual resource does his department have to actually deliver on these particular elements. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Yes, Deputy Ward.
So I thought I'd just a few words to support my colleague and sort of voice a word of warning as a St Helier deputy, as somebody who represents an area which is getting its housing supplies denser and denser and denser every single month and year. And one of the reasons is that because gestures towards green space are made, and then it's, oh, okay, we can build there now because there's that green space over there. And there is a real issue for me, sir, in the island plan, that even those, and there is a reason why I mention this, I'll come back to the Kennervay, is that it seems that developers who do seem very powerful in the island plan, and I was at one of the hearings, I think Deputy Gardner was there, and we sort of heard the insinuation of a developers can say, well, we'll do our best. And the agreement was, it seemed, that, well, yeah, you've got to do your best, but if you can't, don't worry too much about the green space and making sure that actually what we're developing is appropriate. And we have to bear that in mind as we look at these things, because the pressures that will come onto the Kennervay will be exactly the same as they are in St Helier in a few years' time. And it's that term, and I think the Deputy Tadier is saying that B and C, really, they're okay. B is a rewording of what he wants to happen, perhaps with a little more detail. C seems to be agreed upon. But it's part A which is the key. As soon as we say we are going to build at higher densities, that means we will build at densities that are higher than are currently there in any area of the Kennervay. And we are accepting that as a principle in the government plan, in the island plan. And so that is a really important point. And I can understand why the deputy, and also why the Deputy Truscott of St Brelade's is also wondering where he goes with this, because I can understand the pressures he must feel as a St Brelade deputy here, thinking, well, we need more housing, but what is that going to look like? And I mentioned, sir, that free market development has its own pressures. The pressures are not about, does this look nice? Is it with the character of St Brelade's, whatever that means? The pressure is to make money, to pile the houses there, to pack people in, sir, and to make money. And those will be the pressures that have won. They've certainly won in St Helier. They have been victorious in St Helier. And that's what we're seeing, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And so the consequences, I want to just mention some of the consequences of higher densities before we vote for higher densities in another area. There is the issue of schools. I've mentioned it. We have no plan for schools. Certainly in St Helier, certainly not in the Kennervay, island-wide. We have no plan for where children go to school. Look at the waterfront development, a classic example. And if I was a betting man, sir, which I'm not because I'm far too tight for that, I'd put money in. Real problems with that planning issue when it comes to looking at schools for that area, because they are simply not there. And where are those children going to go to school? Green space, sir. we seem to be looking at green space as one big project. But what we should be doing is developing our towns and our built-up areas with satellite parks, small areas, so that people have access within a few minutes to green space. It changes the quality of lives. It gives children somewhere to play, sir. Travel. The higher the density, the more people will be travelling. And certainly from St Helier, so they'll be into Llanelli, so they'll be into St Helier to work. That will lead to increased areas of pollution and air pollution. Not that we monitor air pollution, but let's not go back on that one. There's issues of policing with denser areas. If there aren't areas for children to grow up and have play, there's issues for youth facilities. Yes, this is a microcosm for what's happening in St Helier at the moment. We have built up St Helier with no schools, limited green space, apart from one big area, and I will mention this, and I'll come to it again. One big park area seems to mean that so many develops anywhere near it can say, well, it's okay, we can develop because there's a park over there. And that is what's happened in St Helier. And that, I warn, is what will happen in the Llanelli if we're not careful. There's the issue of parking, the perennial issue of parking. The more dense the area is, the more parking you will need, unless we have a genuine sustainable transport policy and make those cultural shifts, which I just desperately hope that we can. And then there's the notion of sustainability itself. And so that is an issue. I've got a theme that runs through the island plan. There is not a specific and common and usable form of sustainability. So the term sustainability is a movable feast in this island plan. And this is an example of that, and that's what concerns me. I don't want to say anything about what the minister's proposing because, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. He's done okay there, but it's just those words, sir. And if this was removing the words "are higher densities," but inserting the words "they're appropriate for the character of the area," that would have been a really positive amendment. Because not only would it have said to Deputy Tellier, you're right, we've got to be careful with high density over the next few years, but we have to build appropriately for the area. And so what we've got here is an example of gradual change and gradual acceptance. So who knows what's going to happen in the next few years, but in 5 years' time, if somebody stood in this assembly saying, well, actually, the character of the Llanelli has changed so much that we're just building up and building up and building up, and that's where the planning permission's coming from, because we've changed the character of it, so now it's acceptable. And I would be very wary of this, and I would urge members to reject the amendment from the Minister, or at least Part A, if we can vote separately. Go with Deputy Tellier on this, because he's got a very strong point, and I warn, from the centre of St Helier, I issue a warning. I think my colleagues in St Helier and other members of St Helier deputies would agree with me on that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Labby.
I'm pleased to follow Deputy Ward, but I think his perception is slightly wrong with St Helier. In this regard, I say to the Deputy, the arrival of a bit of Millennium Town Park didn't enable more dense developments to be built around it. They were going to be built anyway. What we're trying to do is turn it round now and say we won't develop on this area. We will prioritise green space and park so that it facilitates, as an important amenity, what is being built around there. We're going to come to that discussion later on. But I'm very much on the same page as Deputy Ward, and I look forward to working with him and the district deputies in the future for the north of town, because it is a master plan that we're trying to develop for that, a coherent plan with amenity. And that is, and Deputy Tellier is absolutely right, that is exactly what Llanelli needs too. It needs a proper overview and master plan. And I just think we are perhaps fixating on the wrong D word in terms of density. And what we really need to fixate on is design, is that D word. Because with appropriate, good, cutting edge, amazing, beautiful design, you can achieve higher density without even noticing it. If you stand on the Woolworth Road opposite the old Labour Party headquarters, with that to the back of you, it's now a fantastic pub, but with that to the back of you, and across the street, across the Woolworth Road is Wannsey Street, on one side is the Victorian Terrace, and on the other side was the most brutal 50s and 60s high-rise estate which has fallen into disrepair. It was crime city. It was unpleasant to live in. And that's, I've been watching this over the last 20 years because I have a friend who lives on that Victorian terrace. And what is now replaced, it's called the Elephant Park, is absolutely proper regeneration. And you can feel it in the area and you can see it. And some of it is high, some of it apes the Victorian terrace, but in a modern way along the Wandsey Street. They have not got rid of any of the pocket parks. They've either retained them or replaced them or increased them with the public realm. There are on the ground floor, there's a lot of commercial activity. Some of those some of the whole streets of them are just for independent traders, sole traders, independent traders. So in other words, you don't see any chain that you might see anywhere else in that street. You will see individual, independent shop owners, restaurant owners, bar owners, hairdressers, or what have you. And the fantastic war memorial they have built as part of it too is just what fantastic piece of art that is so edifying. And as I say, it's beautiful. And I don't know the figures, but my feeling is they have probably increased or at least mirrored the density that was there previously, but it doesn't feel like it. And as I say, the whole area has been elevated and it is proper regeneration in Elephant and Castle. And look it up, School the Elephant Park, because we need to be designing what we in our efforts to stop, to close the gap on this terrible housing shortage that we have. We mustn't cut corners, and what we should be designing should be beautiful and to look at and beautiful to live in, and people should want to live in the developments that we are building or allowing to be built. So that is what I would say in terms of the density debate. Good design is the key, ethical design, and we can achieve better density. An area of Le Kennervay which is ripe for redevelopment. I know it's owned by a lot of different owners, but if they could come together with private investment and start looking at that Kennervay precinct and reimagining it completely, that could start things rolling and set the precedent. So I agree with Deputy Taddy on that. But at the moment, I think that the Minister's amendment covers it, and I'm inclined to go with him.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir. And in Deputy Taddier's amendment, he says quite clearly, with the best will in the world, planning remains subjective, and how right he is, never a truer word spoken. He's picked out of the Minister's original documents under spatial strategy, encouraging and high densities, and he's quite right to alert us to some areas of Kennervay just can't sustain high density. But of course, as I said, everything's subjective. When I think of high densities, I would say this to States members. You come across a bungalow with 4 people living in it. They don't have a lot of space. Developer comes along, he develops that bungalow on the same footprint to 2.5 floors. He puts 2 people on each floor, 50% more density, but everybody living in that building enjoys twice as much space inside their unit. So we need to be careful about densities and just assuming that higher densities mean tighter and less space inside the buildings. But Deputy Taddier, Deputy Ward's quite right as well. We need to be so careful about amenity space and green space outside. The Minister's come back and the amendment to the amendment we debate now, and he's added the word appropriate. And I'm pleased to follow Deputy Truscott because I sit on the planning committee, and he highlighted the Apollo Hotel where density is increasing. But similarly, last week we also went to another site where a developer turned 2 flats into a proposed 7, significantly increasing the density. And the committee felt, because it was inappropriate to the character of the area, that it wasn't going to go through, and it didn't. So I say to members, have some faith in the planning system. I appreciate words are important, but planning is always subjective. And I think where the Minister's amended Deputy Tadyer to say now at higher densities that are appropriate to the character of the area, that we should have faith in that, and the planning system will take charge afterwards and deliver what is right for those parts of Kennervay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Conataba of St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to support Deputy Tuddy in this because all this, we all need housing. We know we need homes, but there is no other strategy to go with it. There's no immigration policy. There's no work permits. We just keep allowing people to come in, and then we keep finding a one-bedroom home. We think in the island plan, there was nothing at all that related to open space, youth clubs, or primary schools. And so this density business is just, it's another word for what sometimes companies put plans in, and they put plans in because that's what they want people to think they want. But the thing you've got to watch is when it says a revised plan, because that's what the company actually wanted, not what they put through in the first place. So all power to Deputy Tadyer for looking after Lake Kennervay. And I know how he feels. I'm having the same problem in St Saviour's, where we've got so many people. We've got all the schools, the density and the lifestyle that people have that they pass through does not resemble any of the people who are actually St Saviour's residents. So I'm with you on this one, Deputy Montfort-Tadyer, and I hope a lot more people will realise that there's more to living on this island and living in a one-bedroom flat with no garden than there is to anything else. So please think very hard when you vote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conataba. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I listened very intently to the contributions to this debate from all of the representatives of St Brelard. It's my second favourite parish after all, so I want to do what I can to make sure that that part of the island gets the absolute best out of this island plan process, as in fact I do, of course, the whole island. But I was listening particularly intently to those speeches from that parish's representatives, because we're going to have a lot more debates over the next few weeks about all the different parts of the island, and people will speak up for their particular communities, and those of us who represent other parts of the island have to try to objectively decide what we think is in the best interests. And I'm pleased to follow the Constable of St Saviour, who drew the parallel with what's happening in her parish as well, because what Deputy Tadyer is trying to do with his amendment is he's trying to make sure that we get things in place first before we take on the risk of allowing higher density in an area without a proper plan for what may happen as a result of it and what can be done to support that community, make sure they've got the infrastructure, make sure they've got the school places. And what the Minister is asking to do with his amendment to give a green light for higher density now is to put the cart before the horse, I think. And the Deputy of St Martin spoke about planning being subjective and how having higher density is not necessarily a problem, and in instances it can be a good thing. And I obviously completely agree with him there. And Deputy Labby mentioned Elephant and Castle. Well, I can raise him Stratford there, which is where I used to live in London, which is now completely unrecognisable from what it was before the Olympics took place because of all the investment it had. And now it's higher density populated there, but it's a much nicer area. The reason it's a much nicer area is because they planned very carefully to make it so. They made sure that with the investment and more homes being built there and everything that went with it, that they prepared for it properly to make sure what they ended up with was genuinely comfortable to live in, and not do what I risk the Minister's amendment does, which is to say, yes, we'll work on a plan over the next few years, but in the meantime, go for it. Which does mean that when it comes to putting that plan together, that will be more difficult because of what will have been done in the meantime, packing more homes into the area without necessarily improving the transport system at the same time without necessarily making sure there are enough school places and all the rest of it. So what Deputy Tadier's original amendment does by asking for that master plan, and the Minister has suggested a different date for it, that's absolutely fine, is to make sure that whatever the future for Lekeneve is, we get it right by directing the appropriate amount of attention to it in the meantime, but by putting these words about higher densities back into it with the first part of the Minister's amendment, he's putting the cart before the horse. And so I think that Deputy Tadier, and supported by the Constable of St Brelard, made the case extremely well for that. And Deputy Truscott sounded like he could be persuaded, and I hope he will be persuaded, to not necessarily oppose the idea of Lekeneve changing in years to come, but to take a bit of time to make sure they get it right by having that master plan, get the community to contribute to it, and make sure that the Lekeneve area and the areas surrounding it really get the best out of whatever change is going to come over the next few years. So I would urge members to oppose Part A of this amendment, which puts the cart before the horse, and support Deputy Tadier's original amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Yes, Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. And I'll speak briefly just to address some of the Housing Minister's points, which I don't think were valid to this particular debate. I'm afraid, Housing Minister, that higher density means just what it says, higher density, and nothing else. Whether that's inappropriate or appropriate is another matter. What's appropriate to what's currently in place at, say, Clos des Arbres? Clos des Arbres is full of bungalows. That's what's in context there. Not high-rise, not high density, not pack them in. So when we look for what does it mean, packing them in, we have to look to St Helier, because we've already packed them in. All sorts of sites, Ancourt, Ann Street, Ketteville, Play.com site, all surrounding the Millennium Park, of which I'm truly proud. But now we got back to the position that we had before Millennium Park, which was immensely dense. We've got flat after flat after flat, blocks of flats. And I thought Deputy Tadier was very mild and reasoned when he said the developer takes one building and converts it into 4, and then perhaps the planning committee comes along and says, no, you can't have that. Let's knock that back down to 3 or 2. In the reality, in St Helier, certainly, in terms of density of housing, it's not 1 into 4. It's let's put 150 1, 2 and 3 bed flats on this site, knowing full well that somebody's going to object and the planning committee will probably knock it back, say knock 10% off it. No, you can't have that. But actually, I think it was the Constable of St Saviour said that's exactly what they planned. What they wanted was the 10% off figure. So they put in the bid, everybody knows how to do it. They get it knocked back to what they intended in the first place. So the question is, do we want to see Lekeneve and its environs looking like the back of town after the density of building that's gone up there? I believe we don't. I urge members to support Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, Deputy. No other member wishes to speak. I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Sir, thank you. I'd like to start by congratulating members because I think we've just had an excellent debate on town design, town planning and development, land development issues. And all the right issues have come out. I can answer Deputy Southern's question straight away. my amendment is not brought because I want to see the Kennervay transformed and become just like other parts of town where we have not done as well as we should in urban planning terms. I have to accept that our urban planning record has not been what it should be. And of course, members spoke about developments elsewhere. I'm not familiar with the Elephant Castle, but I certainly am for Stratford. Stratford in London was the area where I spent many of my young youth as a young man when I first started work, and I worked in that area of Stratford when it was railway yards, coal dumps, polluted, River Lee. I remember it well. What a transformation. And Senator Mesick is right. You go there now, you go to events at the Olympic Park. I was moved to tears when I first went to see the transformation that was achieved in that part of London. And I still am when I go there. Well, what does it illustrate? Because this is where the difference, how did that happen? I'll tell you why. I was lucky to have some, to be able to get some, I suppose I spent some time with, or I had the benefit of a lot of presentations and work from a couple of bodies. The original London's Development Corporation, which was originally set up, and then they became the London Thames Gateway Development Board. And no question, but what they did, how did they achieve that? It was done by an infrastructure-led development. Government put money in. It built the infrastructure. It provided the investment in the community facilities, which then led, in turn, to private development opportunities. And if you get the formulas right, the record shows that you could probably achieve £10 of private investment for every £1 of public investment. And what have we done? We've never done that. We did, Jersey to its credit, did in the 80s and 90s by buying hotels in town and investing in them and making sure they were not built to excess density levels. Not built to those levels. But of course, since in recent years we've become very, I think to be honest, very right wing. We've said, well, let the private sector do it. And we've stood back and we've tried to manage that. Now, and I think what members have said about the fact that we have not provided the community infrastructure, the schools, the youth centres, the open spaces that we should have done, because that's the only way you can make urban spaces work, tells you about what went wrong, the lessons that we should learn for the mistakes in the previous island plan. We've now an opportunity with this one to put it right. And so my amendment that I put here, and as the Deputy of St Martin tells us, he's dead right. There's no perfect wisdom here. Those members who make these planning decisions all the time know you have to make judgments. And I think that, now, so we need to put in place the tools. Now, fortunately, we're talking the Kennervay here. Now, we are fortunate because we are so lucky in that part of the island because we've got the Kennervay playing fields. We've got the Crewe Country Park. We've got Pont Marquet Country Park. We've got Railway Walk. So this is a different character, the area. So we're starting to develop the feel of this area anyway. And so gives us lessons for what we need to do in town. And we have got things. This plan, for example, we've already agreed, members perhaps didn't notice, but on the issue of our way we discussed this morning, Deputy Ward asked us, and I agreed, that his amendment, which will safeguard the site, the gasworks site, for a school. We've agreed to go for that. Well, unless there's any other use. But I'll just flag it up, so members may not have known what they were doing, but that's what they did. So, protect it from other development, but of course, that's the story when we get to, well, no, we won't get to that, unless other uses are agreed for it. So, there is that. There's standards in here in the new plan about open space. So a mandatory requirement for open space, and members will know dead keen. I'm passionate about Warwick Farm. We can't put it in the middle of the open urban area, put it on the edge. Make that space to help our communities work. So we are doing things. So, specific questions. Constable of St Ballard asked me, well, what do I remember about master plans in St Ballard? Well, I'm sorry, I didn't come to Jersey till 1979, so I don't know. But what I can tell him is that the master plan for the development of the Bellevue Leisure Park was done in the 90s and produced 250 homes. And that's turned into a very great success, in my view. And that was done, guess what? Public sector investment, led, intervene. So that was done. And of course, density. Deputy Russell Labby told us correctly, design. Oh, it was wonderful to hear that, because that was so right. It isn't just about the numbers, it's about the design. And of course, I asked for numbers. I said, well, what do you know about the density in this area? And I was told, well, Walter Benet Court, which is the new development, which has just gone up next to the new Le Kennevet School, has got a density of 80 dwellings per hectare. Now, I drive past that a lot. I walk past it a lot. It looks pretty good to me. It looks a nice place to live. And that is several times the density of other developments in that area. So what are we going to do? Are we afraid to set our architects and our planners the challenge of producing the quality of homes that we need? Or are we going to say, no, we can't do that, and we will just stay as we are? My submission is on that, colleagues, that we should go with it. And I think the amendment is designed to help us do that. And I accept the point that Deputy Masson raised. It's a very good point. Not much point in having a policy that says we're going to have supplementary planning guidance to do all the details if it never gets done. Well, it's axiomatic as far as I'm concerned that if there's a proposal in here to do that, then that is going to have to be funded in the government plan. And next Council of Ministers have got to stop cheese pairing on money to be spent in this area. So when those proposals come forward, they need to go in the plan to fund them. Because you don't get a master plan for an area like that for peanuts. It's going to require what? So there we are, I'll make that point. So I can't guarantee that it won't be there, but I'm sure the next minister will absolutely follow through. So it's minister's choice, member's choice. I make the amendment. Thank you. Ask for the appeal, please.
Thank you. The appeal has been called for.
So will it be separate parts?
Yes, there'll be separate votes on paragraph A and B. To remind members, A deals with building density and B deals with a master plan for the Le Kennevet and adjacent areas. So those joining the meeting via the Teams link can cast their votes in the chat channel, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber in relation to part A of this amendment to the amendment. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that Part A has been adopted at 30 votes pour and 12 votes contra. And,
12, please.
and there's been a desire expressed that all the pour and the contra be read out. Greffier.
Those voting pour in the chamber, Senators Farnham and Moore, the Connétables of Grouville, St Peter, St Mary, St One and St Clement, Deputy Lewis, Pinnell, Deputy of St Martin and St One, Deputy Labby, the Deputy of St Mary, Deputies Young, Ash, Morrell, Guida, and the Deputy of St Peter, Deputy Hegerat, Deputy Ayer and Deputy Gardner. And in the chat, those voting for Senator Lafondre, Senator Gorst, Deputy Martin, the Deputy of St John, the Connétable of St Lawrence, Deputy Wickenden, the Connétable of St John, Deputy Truscott, Senator Ferguson. Those voting contre in the chamber, Senator Mezek, the Connétables of St Brelard, St Martin, Deputy Southern, the Deputy of Grouville and Deputy Ward, and in the chat, Deputy Tadier, the Connétable of St Saviour, Deputy Masson, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Pamplin, Deputy Doublé.
And we now move on to Part B of the amendment. The amendment. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel. And I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And Part B has been adopted unanimously, 42 votes pour and no votes contra. We now return to Amendment 43 as amended. Does any member wish to speak on the amended amendment? If no member wishes to speak, I think it's appropriate to invite you, Deputy Tadier, to reply in any event, because your proposition has been altered. Do you wish to address the Assembly, Deputy Tadier?
I do. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the invitation. Obviously, I'm disappointed as to Part A. I did scratch my head and even wondered whether it was in order. Clearly it's been allowed, but it was the Minister's amendment has negated what I was seeking to do in the first part, and perhaps the lion's share of what I was trying to protect in the Lekena Bay area was against inappropriate development at higher densities. It's probably worth saying early on, I'm not going to speak on most of the proposition amendments I would have thought, which members would be relieved about. But I think there will be common themes that run throughout the course of this debate, which are also relevant to this particular amendment, which is now being amended. and it's the problem we have under a system, I suppose, such as we have, where we don't have any joined up politics yet, where we've not got a full island plan, but we've got a bridging island plan, which has been presented at a time when we don't have up-to-date census data, when the last census was done in 2011. So we don't even know what the needs or concerns are around Llanelli or any of our other communities, for example. Not statistically up to date as we might have hoped to do. We still don't have land transaction taxes. We still don't have empty property taxes or mechanisms to deal with those. Yet we are now actively encouraging high density development in our urban areas. And I can see why it's really difficult for perhaps, I feel a bit like a lone voice. I appreciate the support of those in the Assembly who voted for it, and of course the support of my own party. And I think this is something we're going to see more of in the future, is how do you protect the interests, and here we're talking about geographical interests of the island, when in fact I fully suspect that what's happened here is a divide and conquer approach from the rest of the Assembly and the ministers, because of course you might as well put the development into St Helier and into St Brelard, because that means it's less likely to be developed disproportionately on our patches. And I think this is what's happened. And whilst we get some very fine words from the minister saying that he thinks that development has been too right-wing, it's been too laissez-faire, we've effectively seen the minister doing the bidding of the neoliberals here. So that when now somebody comes with a plan to knock down a bungalow or some bungalows in Llanelli Park, in Clos de Sable, on Petite Route de Miel, they will say, well, look, this is what you agreed to. It's okay to have high density properties which are in keeping with the area, and I'll make sure I pebble dash it, and I'll make sure that I put the right roof on the 4 bungalows that I'm building instead of just the 1. And I think that's going to be really difficult when it's in black and white, sir. The positive that I do want to focus on is, and it remains to be seen whether any positives can be taken out of this, is that we will have meaningful consultation, meaningful plans, and a master plan for the area, sir, which can look in a joined up way as to what we want to achieve there with the appropriate resources, energy, and spending given to it, sir. So, sir, it's no longer my amendment. I simply acknowledge the changes that have been made, and I say watch this space, because I think it's going to be really difficult in future when residents who are up in arms about inappropriate developments coming forward, and when they go to speak to their local representatives, some of whom have voted for this today, I think that's when the chickens will come home to roost, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the appel called for? Yes, sir. The appel has been called for. I'd like members to turn to their seats to consider the amendment as amended, and the greffier please to open the voting for members in the chamber and for members on the link to cast their votes in the chat channel. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted. 34 votes pour and 8 votes contre.
May we have the contra, please?
Yes.
Those voting contre in the chamber, Senator Mezek, the Conotab of St Mary, Deputy Southern and Deputy Ward. In the chat, the Conotab of St Saviour, Deputy Tadier, Deputy Higgins and Deputy Pamplin.
Next is the 59th Amendment lodged by the Conotab of St Brelard. Yes, Conotab?
Sir, may I ask the Leader of the Assembly to withdraw this amendment?
You may withdraw it. Yes. Leave is not required as the debate's not begun. The next is the 102nd Amendment, which has been lodged by the Minister of the Environment, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words "the Draft Island Plan 2022 to 25," insert the words "except that A. Within Policy PL5, Countryside, Coast and Marine Environment, on page 76 of the Draft Bridging Island Plan, the second sentence of the first paragraph should be substituted with the following: they should also protect or improve the special landscape and seascape character of the protected coastal area. In the Coastal National Park, they should similarly protect or improve its special landscape and seascape character and special qualities of the Coastal National Park and its setting, and be compatible with the purposes of the park. B. At the end of the section entitled Jersey Coastal National Park on page 71 of the Draft Bridging Island Plan, there should be inserted the following: Proposal, National Park legislation. The Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture will work with the Council of Ministers to bring forward, for approval by the States Assembly, proposals for the establishment of a national park in law, with appropriate provisions and mechanisms to A. Define the purposes of a national park in Jersey, B. Determine its appropriate governance in order to secure the purposes of the park, C. Determine the spatial extent of the park, D. Manage land and activities within the park in accord with its own purposes, and E. Ensure public and stakeholder engagement and consultation on all matters associated with National Park. C. Within proposal change permitted development rights in the Coastal National Park, on page 116 of the Draft Bridging Island Plan, the words Coastal National Park should be replaced with the words Protected Coastal Area each time they appear. D. Within policy NE3, Landscape and Seascape Character, on page 118 of the Draft Bridging Island Plan, the second paragraph should be substituted with the following: the highest level of protection will be given to the protected coastal area and its setting. The highest level of protection will also be given to the Coastal National Park and its setting, and additionally, development within it should protect or improve its special qualities and be compatible with the purposes of the park, including and E. The Draft Bridging Island Plan 2022 to 25, including the proposals map, planning zones, be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent upon the adoption of A to D.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Going through these amendments preparing for that debate, I've written on my notes major debate. This is, I believe, one of the most important of the proposals in the island plan, and I think the amendment that I'm proposing now has a distinction of being the last, I think the last amendment, Amendment 102. It was, with my team and with Deputy Guida, we've spent a vast amount of time trying to find a way through the situation where we have, where we need to find a way in which we can have a policy in the draft plan that I believe enables us to protect that special landscape and seascape areas around our coast, but in a way that our community, I don't believe, will in any way affect anybody's rights to enjoy their land and use it and so on, because this is an area of controversy, where the draft plan that I published back in April, when we were developing the plan, I was always unhappy with the notion that the 2011 island plan, which is the one we have now, had this planning zone in it called the Coastal National Park, where there is no Coastal National Park. And of course, when I took on the job of Minister, one of the things that I got was complaints about, and justifiably and understandably, very loud voices from those outstanding citizens who have worked tirelessly to try and progress something that doesn't exist in law. They were given no money for it. They would, effectively come to the point of frustration. So I made sure that there was money in the island plan, in the government plan, to enable that to progress. But progress via the Economic Development Minister and not the Environment Minister, because the notion of a park is about recreation, it's about use, enjoyment of the land and promotion for economic reasons, which are all very valid, but I believe sit outside the parameters of what the island plan seeks to do, which is to protect a special area of landscape. So I did have discussions with the leaders of what is now Jersey National Park Limited, Country Park Limited, about my intention to make it into a planning zone. And then I did get a very strong negative reaction. So I thought, well, we'll wait, we will push it, we will leave it as proposed, as the Coastal National Park was extended, in accordance with the expert work that was done to reassess our landscape qualities. I will leave that for consultation. And of course, we all now know that the consultation led to very significant objections to that proposal. Not that I hear any objections to that because of the need to protect our coast and countryside for damaging development. But it was because there was a perception that somehow this was government intervening in the use of private land, conferring access rights, controlling what people could do, where they could walk their dogs, what kind, have picnics and so on there. I'm afraid those perceptions became very strong, and they were reflected all the way through to the planning inquiry. Now, even though the planning inquiry upheld that they were perceptions that are not real, they are not founded, there's no basis for that, I considered that it is much more important that we can be very, very clear that we are protecting our special landscape and seascape areas. And it's those around the edge of the coast. And we all know where they are. When we drive around the island, you can see we are jewels in the crown. And why I wanted to have that zone reassessed, because the last time it was done was in, I believe, 1999, when there was a study of our landscapes done by, I think, land use consultants, and that formed a pillar of major work, which was adopted in the 2011 plan. But of course, it needs updating and revision. And because a lot of the boundaries have become illogical, arguments could be made about it, and there was a lack of clarity about that. So the evidence base that led to having to identifying where the boundaries of what I now propose to be a new planning zone called the protected coastal area, is all in the evidence base. You've seen it in the room. It's been on the website for probably almost a year now. The evidence base of to support, and where every part of our landscape is analysed, looking at the underlying geology, which obviously geology is the key to our landscapes, but also the geoclimate and all that kind of thing, and also the biodiversity that is within it. But primarily it's a landscape piece of work. And so I decided that I think the thing to do, the right way to go, was to make an amendment, which is this, which says, okay, if there is a very strong body of opinion, and of course we'll go on to debate the Deputy of St One's amendment, which was of course lodged very quickly after I'd lodged the draft plan. And so I decided that I'm going to offer the states a way in which we can achieve the preservation of our coasts and countryside, but do it in a way where we have a planning zone called protected coastal area, where within the wording of the policy, all of the words about, which used to be there, about protecting, accessible, with the, being compatible, of any use being compatible with the purposes of the park, has been deleted. It has been deleted. So basically this amendment enables us to leave the coastal national park where it is, unchanged, and to have an extended zone, which is provide that highest level of protection that planning law can offer. And it's about protecting it from inappropriate and damaging development. I think we all know, we could all go around the island and look, say, well, where has these policies gone wrong in the past? I mean, the famous example, St Martin's Parish, La Coupe, for example. There are many others. And maybe I will look up my list at the moment, but I don't think I want to dwell on past. But I want to make sure that we've got the strongest policy protection, because to me this is a fair trade-off. As I said in my proposing opening remarks to this debate, if we are going to have to make concessions and do things and allow development or greenfield developments, it's right that we protect the special parts of our island. And that's what this amendment does. And it's about underpinning our island identity and our culture and heritage. Of course, there is big pressure because these areas, which are the special landscape qualities, they're the very places which are most desirable for people to live and develop. So the pressure on them is very high. And it's not going to get any less. So it has been it's been relaxed actually, how best to do it. So my original proposal, I believe, has been misunderstood. I think my notes here, I'm asked to say misrepresented. I think it has in some quarters, but I make no, that's probably pejorative, but certainly misunderstood. And those unfortunate comments have done very, very significant damage to confidence. And I want to restore that with this amendment. The planning arguments for having this expansion zone are very enormous. So it will be called the Protected Coastal Area, and it will also include the highest level of protection for landscape and seascape, because obviously in the past we've had no recognition. The fact how Jersey looks from the sea, it perhaps is as important as how Jersey looks from the land going out to sea. That strip is crucial, and what we do with it and how we develop it. So if members go with my proposition, the protected coastal area will become the coastal national park, which remains exactly as it is, will not be changed at all. One jot will simply become a sort of a small subset area of the protected coastal area. And as was said so well this morning by Deputy Gita, and I think and others, there will be a need to redefine the coastal national park and define it in law, which is why I've adopted all of the proposal from the Deputy of St One, who made some excellent points in his amendment, where he said that we need to bring forward, if we're going to have a national park, it needs to be in law. And we need to know what the rules are and who looks after it and how it's managed. At the moment, it exists as a limited company. Nothing wrong with that, but well, also I'll leave that for members. That will be an issue for governance of the future if members go with the proposal, which is part of my proposition. Determine where the boundaries are, because there is a lot of talk that the boundaries can be tightened. And I think that would be responsibility. I believe that work will primarily go on with the Economic Development Minister, because if the park is used as a means of economic, as an economic interest, and for example, I've seen, things that we've all seen pictures of the Ecrihose and barbecues on the Ecrihose for Visit Jersey. Something, where we trying to bring special measures on our special places, and yet we do things like that. Disgusting. And I've protested. Anyway, I'll get that out. It really, because look, we've got gems. These are world-class gems. So that's that piece of work. What I've done is I've built in the sensible suggestions of the Deputy of St. Wom into this as to be into the second part. But fundamental to it is part A, and that's the guts of it. I've dropped the proposal to extend the Coastal National Park. That will remain as it is. And instead have a protected coastal area, which is a planning zone, which, as Deputy St. Martin absolutely said, I believe it has caused massive confusion over many planning decisions over the years. This will end it. There will be clarity. And I think that is, for me, it is absolutely a huge, fundamental importance. Development, of course, can still happen, but it needs to make sure it doesn't harm the character of those areas. And it is based on a sound and objective analysis, and it's actually the piece of work won a national award. A national award it won. And so, again, because the constitution of what we've already got as a coastal national park, it's a legacy from 2011. It's in as a proposal, and I'm just trying to refresh myself, who will bring it forward. I'm pleased it's not the Environment Minister. The Minister of Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture will work with the Council of Ministers. So that escapes the next Environment Minister to do that job. I see that we've lost our current Minister for Economic Development, but I'm sure. But anyway, so I think there's got a real structure about my amendment. This is the environment thing. Protect the landscape, protect the spectral area, and yes, we will review the coastal park, or the Minister for Economic Development will look at the whole structure of the thing and bring it back to the Assembly. And then the Assembly can make its mind up. Now, having said that, I got absolutely I've got nothing but the respect for the team of wonderful people that are wholehearted committed to try and make this thing happen. And so part of my proposal, that is we all know the leading lights who I've given their many years, if not a lifetime in one case, of working for our environment. And we've had letters. We've had letters about that, and the proposal I'm bringing now, this amendment, I believe will allow us to get back to a much more ordered, sensible thing. And of course, now I have to say it is true that the planning inspectors absolutely supported the need to protect the special area of coastal and landscape. And of course, part of the argument at that time was, well, they're being farmed, and so they're not of outstanding quality. They are. Anybody who drives down the road, say, from Plymouth, going out to Gronay, and looks across that farmland right across to the sea, and you can see the other islands, and beautiful, it just lifts the soul, that would pretend, not think that is outstanding landscape. There are others. And on the east of the island, I'm a Westie, But those on the east of Ireland know they're wonderful coast around our northeast coast. It is, and the north coast. Oh, these are just, they're the crown jewels for us. But the inspector said, we think it's entirely appropriate you protect them. They did say they thought that I should carry on with it. But I think I've had to, as drafted, but I've reflected, and with the support of my assistant minister, we discussed it in much agony. We decided that the right thing to do was to make that adjustment and bring it into line with what it should be, the protected zone, the planning zone, leave the coastal national park where it is, and have this proposal to redefine its boundaries, not as part of planning law, as something completely separate, as a standalone body, led by the Economic Development Minister, which will, I believe, will be to everybody's benefit. And that is the purpose of my amendment. I ask for members' support, please. Thank you. I make the proposition.
Thank you, Minister. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment?
Yes.
Yes, Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. I'm trying to reconcile the Minister's speech with the Minister's speech on the 88th Amendment about marine parks. I'm trying to, and national parks. I'm trying to work out how we can have some but not the others. But of course, ISO, the next Economic Development Minister, I'm sure will be pleased to follow the will of the Assembly, that the work done, the principle of the work behind the whatever designation we decide to give it is absolutely sound. So in fact, if I get the chance prior to the election, so I might just try and get this bit of work done and perhaps extend it to include our coastal waters in an area of about 30% of our total waters. So thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Yes, Connaught Iverson 1.
Thank you, sir. And first, I say congratulate the Minister on, without wishing to be disrespectful, finally arriving at a common sense approach on this. As he well knows, when he first proposed the Coastal National Park, I was less than happy. The Coastal National Park is one of Jersey's jewels and one of the best things we've ever done. It protects our national assets, our beaches, our lovely dunes, our lovely North Coast walkways. And I think to dilute it, in my view, would have been a serious mistake, because it would have allowed things to happen which shouldn't have happened. Now, the Minister has now come clean and told us what he wants, and I totally agree with what he says. We need to protect our valuable vistas, and this new proposal of his will do exactly that. And also, it will allow the Coastal National Park to carry on in its present form, of course with a review by Senator Farnham, but it will mean that it will carry on as it is, and will carry on protecting the assets that this island has, and which are so easily lost if we start doing things on those assets that we shouldn't do. So I, for one, will be supporting this. I think it's a good move, it's a pragmatic move, and I commend the Minister for the changes that he's made. Thank you.
Thank you, Connaught. Does any other member wish to speak? Yes, Deputy St.
Thank you, sir. And first of all, may I begin just simply by reminding members of my interest in the Coastal National Park, which I declared in my amendment number 30, in that I have a close relation who owns property in the present Coastal National Park and what may be in the protected coastal zone if approved. Sir, as the Assistant Environment Minister told us this morning, a zone that is in an island plan, in a development plan, should not be called a park. We haven't got a park. We have simply a planning zone. And it's inappropriate. I believe it was inappropriate at the outset to have attempted to expand this zone called a park into an area which comprised 30% of the island's landmass and comprised a significantly greater number of houses and businesses within it. And it's not surprising that led to confusion and misunderstanding. And for some people, there was actually no confusion about it. It was a view that that zone, that element of the Bridging Island Plan should become a park over which there would be specific rules, and it was spoken that there would be an extension to the Coastal National Park. And we all love this park, so-called. I totally agree with the Minister. We recognise it as a jewel in our crown, the best parts of our island that are valued and that we've enjoyed. And in that sense, we do see it and understand it as much more than a planning zone. There are areas that are the very best parts of Jersey. But actually, its status is simply a planning zone. And we need to do better than that. And therefore, I believe we need to support this amendment, which doesn't yet create a so-called park with so many misunderstandings that go with that word, but which provides the protection, the appropriate protection against development, and then separately, under another minister, allows for the proper creation of what should be a park, protecting and recognising and promoting the very best sensitive and valuable landscapes of the island. But the trouble was, simply by extending what was the 2011 Coastal National Park into, in the case of my parish, 2/3 of my parish, 2/3 of St Martin's parish, many other areas, this would have brought in so many homes, so many businesses, so much working agricultural land, and wouldn't anyone occupying those homes, running those businesses, want to know the implications of it? And the island plan couldn't and didn't give any of those implications. It didn't tell us how many homes would be affected, how many businesses would be affected. There was no assessment of what the simple extension might mean for the people who were to be thrown into a so-called extended coastal national park. And the misunderstanding arose because there are people who consider the coastal national park as something other than a planning zone. Under the rural economy strategy, a charitable company has been established called the Jersey National Park Limited that has received public funding for conservation of areas in the Coastal National Park and the promotion of areas with it. That company has produced a draft management plan and a draft action plan. And I commend them, because if we are to have a park, and I would like to see a properly established coastal national park, we do need to manage it proactively, and we do need to encourage the people to visit it, whilst at the same time of conserving its areas within it. And there's a balance needed there, which is recognised by the purposes of the Coastal National Park as defined by this company, which are the conservation and enhancement of the natural beauty, wildlife and cultural heritage of the Jersey National Park, and secondly, to promote opportunities for the understanding and enjoyment of the special qualities of the Jersey National Park by the public. And there's a tension which I think all national park authorities in all jurisdictions find. We want people to visit a national park and enjoy it, but at the same time it's important to conserve and enhance those areas, and sometimes the imprint of humans in an area can act completely contrary to that. So there's that balance that is needed so carefully. And the original proposal in the island plan just didn't explain how that might be achieved by throwing in 30% of our island landmass into an extended coastal national park. There needs to be certainty over how we achieve this. There needs to be good oversight and governance, which I would suggest can be placed in legislation so that there's a parliamentary overview of how a coastal national park is managed. Because at the moment, all we have is the planning department exercising development controls over something that is called a park. And this so-called park will only have lasted for 3 years, the length of the Bridging Island plan. After that time, its future is just uncertain. A coastal national park on that basis would have to be rebirthed every time an island plan is presented for debate. That's not good, I suggest, and there's no wonder there has been confusion over what on earth being in a coastal national park would mean. There needs to be a proper process for adding areas to the coastal national park and evaluating its special qualities. And I agree with the Minister, those areas where you drive along the north coast and you see those vistas of the other Channel Islands or fronts. Yes, they're wonderful. They are the special qualities. But equally, I think of areas in my parish which would have been added to the coastal national park, where there's bungalows on one side of the lane and bungalows on the other side of the lane, and I can't say why that bungalow on the left is of special, in a zone that has such special characteristics, and the bungalow on the right doesn't. Equally, passing agricultural fields, one on the left and one on the right, and there are no views of the coast, even though they're within it was proposed, a coastal national park. Why one should be in an extended coastal national park and not others? Because the proposed park in the original plan was drawn with roads as its boundaries. And I simply didn't see the sense in that, because we've got better ways of establishing boundaries. We've got a good land registry which can establish boundaries. We've got clear maps, and why roads were taken at all throughout the proposal just didn't make sense to me. But that is why we need to establish, I believe, in legislation, a process in which these considerations can be taken into account, and moreover, people can be engaged. It is right that people who might live in an extended coastal national park are consulted, and they be allowed to make representations as to what that means for them. And when the coastal national park is established, that they have a say in its management. At the moment, they do not. So that is why I put in my amendment number 30. And I'm pleased that if this amendment is supported, the Minister has replicated my proposals to task the Environment Minister with creating the legislation that establishes permanently our coastal national park and that allows public participation in all the thoughts around how far it should be extended, what goes on within it, and the management of it. But there are still some who might think that we should not follow the Minister's lead with the present amendment he's putting forward, but that we should go back to that original, the original part of this Bridging Island plan. So we've had a letter, which the accompanying email from the chair of the Jersey National Park Limited told us that this letter to us lays out in detail the view of the 3 individuals currently driving forward the National Park project to the various proposals regarding boundary changes. And they urge that the Coastal National Park be extended now by rejecting the Minister's amendment. They assure us they will work with stakeholders and they will ensure they respect the views of householders and businesses incorporated into an extended coastal national park. And I know those persons are genuine and they are motivated and they are passionate about the coastal national park. And I commend them for that. But I'm afraid it doesn't give me comfort, because the park they envisage is not actually created yet. All we have is that development zone, which might be called a park, but shouldn't be. It's better to do this properly and give greater support to the Coastal National Park, for the present keeping it within its established boundaries, and then we will move forward to do this in a properly legislated way. So I can support the Minister's amendment by establishing this zone, the protected coastal area, because it does not extend the Coastal National Park in that drastic way, and it avoids those misunderstandings and confusions over what being in a park meant. And let's not diminish the confusion it caused. In my view, it was quite understandable, and concerns were expressed which we absolutely need to take account of and address. And at last, the Minister's amendment does address it, I believe, and should be supported by all of us. I hope it can be. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to follow the Constable of St Juan and his deputy, because like them, I too had great concerns when the Minister first lodged his proposals. And the first thing I'd like to say, sir, is I currently own some woodland. I'm very fortunate to own some woodland which is in the Coastal National Park, and the rest of the property in which I live will be in the additional area which the Minister proposes to call the Protected Coastal Area. But I'd just like to say the first thing I wrote down here was, how did we get to where we are today? And I was disappointed when the Minister first lodged his proposition, because what he should have done was lodged what he has under item B in this amendment that he's brought back. The park, as we heard this morning, is a recreational area that is designated for a purpose, and that's what we're currently now going to do if we adopt this amendment from the Minister. And this was what worried so many people when the original proposal came out, because we're going to go ahead, we're going to put in law, define the purpose of the park, we're going to determine the appropriate governance, and a lot of people were hugely concerned about what the governance of an area that would be extended and would still be called the Coastal National Park. We're going to determine, or somebody will determine, the spatial extent, the management of the land and activities in the park. We'll come back to this Assembly if the Minister's amendment is accepted for approval. And then finally, we will also engage with the public and consult with them on the matters associated with the park. And that's something else that hadn't happened, because certainly a huge number of parishioners in my parish came to me saying, we knew nothing about this until it came onto the draft Bridging Island plan. So I'm pleased and grateful to the Minister for coming back with his amendment, following the work, the huge amount of work the Deputy of St Juan and others have done. And I'm pleased to have been part of that, a small part of that work, to pressurise the Minister to make these changes, because I think it's essential. I say to the Minister for Economic Development, who has been muttering, why is my marine park different to the coastal park, is that what he proposed was a park, and he didn't come up with the bits that the Environment Minister has come up with today. He didn't come up with the extent, the management activities, the appropriate governance, and the consultation. And had he done so, maybe we would have made further progress. But that's what the Minister for the Environment did this morning with the Marine Park. He's put in the plans for having a spatial, a marine spatial plan over the next few years, and we'll move forward with that. But I finish with this, sir, and I say to members, be careful what you wish for. I know the group I was with have got what we wished for, if you like, in keeping the area that is named the Coastal National Park where it is. But we have, in accepting the Minister's amendment, found ourselves with an area now to be called, if this is accepted, the protected coastal area, which will provide the highest level of protection for the island's best landscape and seascape character areas under policy NE3, and that's right. But what I say to members is this: that is 30% of the island's landmass. Look at it the other way. That means all the development, all the housing, all the major structures which will come on in the future will go in the other 70%. We need to be careful. We need to be very careful. As we develop the definitions, the governance, and the other areas, what will happen in the Coastal National Park in the future, I'll also be looking very carefully to see what help there will be for businesses that continue to want to try to work in this protected coastal area, and also for those who would like to try to develop a little bit more in this protected coastal area, because there may not be very much going on. I know that could be great, and there are fantastic areas of this island that need protection, but I do warn, we've got a lot of people to house, we've got a lot of things to do, and 30% of our landmass will not probably be available to do that once this goes through. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir, and I'm grateful to the Minister for his consensual approach and the significant change that he has adopted in bringing this amendment as opposed to what was originally included in the plan. But much like the Deputy of St Martin's, I am a little concerned by the description of the protected coastal area and feel that there is not enough description given in that as to what exactly that will mean and what exactly is meant by the highest level of protection. So I'd be grateful if, in summing up, the Minister could describe to us what he anticipates will be allowed under the protected coastal area. As the Deputy of St Martin has pointed out, it still will make up a considerable percentage of the island's landmass. And if the Minister could also describe how it will differ from the protection levels that are already in place for those particularly sensitive sites that are already defined under the current island plan.
Thanks, Senator. Does any other member to speak? Yes, Deputy Gita.
Sorry, sir. I could repeat the Deputy of St. Owen's speech word for word, so I won't. It was exactly what I wanted to say, but I would like to add one thing, which is the expression of our gratitude to the people who have tirelessly worked towards the idea of a coastal national park. Am I allowed to name them, sir?
I think in this context you probably can.
I'm sure they will be happy to hear their names, but they are local heroes. It's, of course, Mr. Jim Hopley, Mr. Mike Stantiford, and all the many, many volunteers that I've worked with them. They've tirelessly spent more than the last 10 years working towards a national park, but unfortunately, they were chasing a ghost. They were chasing something that didn't have legal existence. And I think it's high time that we change that and that we gave them something to work with. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased that you gave Deputy Gita permission there, because I named those individuals earlier in the speech, but I didn't ask for permission. I just went ahead and did it. I actually, it's not so much a speech. I just want clarification from the Minister, please, when he sums up. If he could confirm that the coastal protected area, as described in his amendment, is the same extended coastal national park area as was initially intended. I believe that is the case, but I want to make sure that this is the extended version of the coastal national park planning zone, so to speak, that's being renamed the protected coastal area. And with regard to Senator Moore's questions, I reiterate that as well. Anything he could tell us about what is meant by the highest level of protection, I'm sure the Assembly would appreciate that. But if you could clarify the extent of this protected coastal area, I'd be grateful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. If no other members wish to speak, Deputy Labby.
Thank you, sir. And on a similar vein, something that the Deputy of St Martin has just said has slightly worried me in terms of 30% of the island would now be unable to use for new domestic units. Can the Minister confirm or just explain the position for me? Are we saying that existing buildings, let's say existing farm buildings that fall into the new Coastal National Park or area, are we saying that they cannot be, if they're redundant, they cannot be converted to new units of accommodation? So existing structures within the coastal area, are we saying because of trip generation, they can't be regenerated into new domestic units? Because I think if trip generation is being used as the reason why they shouldn't be, we are missing out on huge potential to provide accommodation. And I think if trip generation is the worry, put on more buses. But otherwise, it's the tail wagging the dog. So I won't, if we are not going to be allowed to develop existing structures like old barns and stables into fantastic, actually, potential accommodation, new units of accommodation, then I can't go with it.
Thank you, Deputy. If no other wishes to speak, I call upon the Minister to reply.
Sir, I thank all members, and I think grateful for the comments of members who've recognised the dilemma that I've certainly had, and I do have to accept the criticism that this is an issue should have been faced at the time of the publication of the draft plan. I certainly have had meetings with the Coastal National Park team, and at the time they were very, very strong, and that puts it lightly, that I should proceed with their plans. And I think it is possible that had I not done so at that time, we might well have had a situation where they would not be prepared to continue. That's possible. Couldn't rule that out. I wanted to hear what the community had to say, and I have, I accept belatedly, taken that on board. That's, hands up. In my defence, I think, I can probably say this was at the time, I think, those early meetings took place at the time of COVID, when we couldn't even meet. You can only meet online, and it was pretty difficult at those times, but nonetheless, I still made that choice, which in hindsight was the wrong one. And we wouldn't have get to this point where, belatedly, I have adopted what I believe to be a pragmatic solution, and I believe one which is good for the island. And I'm very grateful for the work that those that have spoken in favour have said, particularly, the Deputy of St Wan's, Deputy St Martin, and indeed Constable St Wan, and I know there are others who put a lot of effort into this. And I don't think I could have myself, and I'll be frank, come up with the terms of reference for the piece of work that's in the proposal that I've now adopted, because it's very much, it goes way beyond the brief of what planning law is all about. Planning law is about managing developments. Nothing else. Developments. And of course, this proposal, the Jersey Coastal National Park, has got much wider purpose than that. And therefore, I couldn't. So what I've been able to do, I've benefited from that, and thank you. And I think by adopting it and bringing it forward, I think it gives us a chance to make a pragmatic decision. Yes, that's because it's a decision made late in the day. I've had to go for a very simple and uncomplicated arrangement. whereby the boundary of the new coastal, the protected coastal area, is in fact the same boundary as what I had proposed in my original proposal. It's the same. And I accept it with all its faults, as Deputy of St Wands told us. Maybe not perfect. But of course, you know, this is a bridging plan for 3 years. We're going to be doing the review anyway, if the members go with this, on the Coastal National Park. In my view, there will be the opportunity to if it's necessary, to refine those boundaries at the time of the next island plan. So I've made that pragmatic choice, because I think to go beyond that would have meant redrawing boundaries, and I just can't even begin to think. So it's a pragmatic solution. Not the perfect one, but it's the best I could do. Now, what are the restrictions? Yes, I have to be quite plain about it. At the moment, the properties that are not in the Coastal National Park, that's the existing area. Sorry, by the way, I should say that the Coastal National Park will still have a boundary, and that will be somewhere within the new boundary of the protected coastal area. It's a subset. I think on the chat, I think the officers have put around a couple of charts. But the one thing that's different between those two areas is that the planning policies proposed for the protected coastal area have removed all of the references that are it's in the existing Coastal National Park policies, which talk about a planning decision needs to reflect or consider the purposes of national park. That's all gone. Anything to do with use is gone. What we're left with is policies that relate to development only. Now, I accept the logic. I don't accept it in absolute terms, that if the area is 30%, well, I think, you know, there are existing buildings in that area. I can't give you what the percentage covered in that area, what, you know, existing buildings. But it doesn't stop any development, but it does have an effect on constraining that. And it doesn't stop, I don't believe, existing and traditional farm buildings. We've got other policies in there all over the island. The conversion of existing farm buildings, traditional farm buildings, has been one of the main tools of our being able to both preserve our special built heritage in some of these wonderful farm complexes that, you know, you might be back in the, Middle East, about 17th or 18th century when you look at them, but provide homes. We've got those policies. They're elsewhere in the plan. That doesn't stop. And of course, you know, planning decisions again, that you just don't make them on the basis of one policy. You make them on the basis of all the policies in the plan and achieving what the purists call a planning balance. And the planning committee do this all the time, and they do it very well. I have to say sometimes they might get it wrong. But generally, you know, it's a tough job. There's no perfect wisdom in here, but we do learn and we make progress. So yes, it is true that those people will have policies applied which give, if you like, places more limits on than they currently have. But I don't think that goes as far as what has been suggested, that prevents any development at all. I think I also have to flag up, but nobody's picked it up, but I'm an honest, you know, I'm not going to, I highlight paragraph C, which you members should know about. Paragraph C of the proposition talks about the need for permitted development rights to be managed. Permitted development right means that under the planning legislation, under the General Development Order, which is probably about 100 pages long, I think, and you know, they're not, it is a nightmare to try and work out. It says what you can do without planning permission. We know there's already a number of restrictions on that, and later on we're going to talk about, when we debate on the 27th of April, we're going to debate conservation areas. We're going to debate the powers in the law and the regulations that are well advanced in that, which working with the scrutiny panel on. So that's well advanced because in anticipation, Sorry, because the island plan maintains the commitment to have conservation areas in our special places. A commitment that was made 30 decades ago. 30 decades. Sorry? Sorry, sir. Three decades. Beg pardon. So I'm getting carried away. I had my fourth injection yesterday. It's maybe a bit heady. 3 decades. So it is. I think we have to recognise that as the island gets more, densely occupied, our population goes up. Where's it going to go? We're going to magically going to solve that tomorrow. We're going to have to, accommodate and adjust. You can't hold things still. But it is equally true that within the protected coastal area, there will need to be a review of permitted development rights. But the beauty of that is members will be pleased. That is done by order. And members know they've got the perfect right under under State's procedure to challenge ministerial orders and have them varied. So that will all be for the future. We'll be a new minister, and I think that will be a story for another day if you approve my amendment, sir. But, sir, I want to thank everybody because this has been a tough choice. It's not, should have got there quicker. I can only apologise for that. And ask members, I'm pleased, I believe this is the right solution. Thank you, sir. I make the proposal.
Do you ask for the appel?
Yes, please, sir.
Sir, point of clarification, sir.
Forgive me?
Point of clarification, please.
Yes.
So wondering if the Minister could clarify.
Do you want to stand up when you're speaking?
Apologies, sir. I'm used to being on Teams. And not, I'm wondering if the Minister could clarify whether this protected coastal area is, I asked, the extended version of the Coastal National Park Planning Zone, or whether it is the original smaller version of the Coastal National Park Planning Zone.
Sorry, sir, I thought I did answer. I probably wasn't clear enough. The protected coastal area takes as its boundary the boundary recommended in the landscape study, which was the one which was originally proposed as for the extended coastal national park area. What I'm saying is that the part of the policies that related to use that were going to be proposed to the whole area will not now extend to that area, to the bigger area at all. But it is, you are correct, sir, the boundaries, sorry, Deputy, the boundaries are the same for pragmatic reasons I've explained.
Thank you. Now the appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are asked to cast their votes in the chat channel. I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the 102nd amendment has been adopted. 40 votes for, 1 vote contra.
Move the one, please.
Yes.
Senator Moore voted contra.
Now the next matter listed is the 30th amendment. Yes, Deputy St. One.
Sir, in view of the last vote, I think the objectives of my 30th amendment have been largely met, and I'd like to thank the Minister for the Environment for his gracious acceptance of people's concerns. But in view of that, the decision we've just made, I'd like to withdraw my amendment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now, the next amendment is the 82nd amendment lodged by Deputy Labby, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words except that within policy GD5, A, the word and should be removed from the end of point 1. B, after point 2 there should be inserted the following. Or 3, there exists a demonstrable aesthetic and practical benefit to replace over refurbishment. C, in the final paragraph, delete the words or sustainability and insert the following: sustainability, aesthetic or practical. D, the Draft Island Plan 2022-25 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary, consequent to the adoption of A and B.
Deputy Labby.
Thank you, sir. This proposition is born out of experience on the Planning Committee, which I sat on for 6+ years. And remember experiences of applications which were trying to fit with the already existing policy to, not to knock down, but to refurb and repurpose existing buildings. And I understand completely the environmental benefit to recycling these buildings rather than completely knocking them down and replacing them. But there are times when no amount of re-engineering and architectural re-engineering is going to come up with as satisfactory a conclusion as demolition and rebuilding might bring. And so, I mean, the officers will tell me, oh, well, that on the planning committee, we did, in my time, we did pass complete demolition of a couple of properties I can remember to be rebuilt. And we were able to find somewhere buried a caveat, a traditional Jersey caveat in law that gets you to do the opposite thing to what the main law actually is asking you to achieve. But I don't think that's right. I think we should leave this to the planning committee, give them the option there that they can make this decision if they feel that all avenues to refurb have been explored. There is with the refurb, you are hemmed in with load-bearing walls. We've sat through applications where the slide rule has got out, and we've been going through wall by wall what is retained and what's new, and whether the percentage fits to call it a refurb rather than an almost complete demolition and a rebuild. And what about and there are just some sow's ears, sir, which will never be turned into a silk purse. And so this is just a clean and efficient way to say, if all those avenues have been explored, the planning committee I have every faith in, and they see these day in, day out, and they will have that there to make this decision cleanly and transparently. And with the hopeful advent of modern methods of construction, which I am working as hard as I can to explore the feasibility of making this a reality for the island, there is also the environmental balance and gain to be weighed between taking an old house out of the equation and putting a new modern methods of construction, modular, fantastically green, cheaper, greener, cleaner, less labour intensive to put up. There is that possibility too, which this would assist. And the final thing is that, as I say, not all sow's ears can be turned into silk purses. And sometimes you look at a building and you think, no, this has had its day. It's time it was replaced. And it's important that we do that, and that each age is able to present its new vernacular and style, if it is good, so that we pass down something from our generation of architectural superiority and something that we'd be proud of. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Yes, Minister.
Thank you, sir. I think this is a case where I think both Deputy Russell Labby and I want the same thing. And sadly, I'm afraid, due to the pressures of having to read 108, 102 amendments and make response to them to horrendous timescales, he and I haven't been able to sit down together and try and resolve things. In a perfect world, we would have been able to do that. So I'm having to rise to oppose the amendment, even though I understand what the Deputy is seeking to achieve, and I can understand how, when he was chairman of the Planning Committee, some experiences that he had with this situation about the policy which deals with the demolition of buildings. Maybe, I think if I'd have been able to have that meeting with Deputy Labby, I'd have said to him, of course, we got ourselves into a bit of a mess. We introduced this is a mess in planning policies in the island plan, which unfortunately since 2014, the Planning Committee have had to deal with. A messy situation where policy was introduced in 2011 in the island plan. It was called GD2, Demolition and Replacement of Buildings, and that was removed in 2014 entirely. So in the 2014 revision, it was taken out because the policy was found to be too inflexible and difficult to measure. And of course, what happened was, unfortunately, when that revision was done, something went wrong, and there was a remaining policy test left over as a kind of a left behind element in the plan called GD1A, where there have been endless arguments, which they should have been deleted at the time, it never was, and led to endless arguments, and certainly I've had to deal with a couple of appeals. And it's been very, very, where that was a key matter. And I think I sought very much, when I was dealing with those appeals, to exercise the type of judgment that Deputy Labby has outlined should be. Now, to get round that, what the team have done, because they think now that this is a policy that we should restore to the island plan. And so on page 87, we have a new policy, GD5, and that now sets out a very clear policy base for making decisions as whether buildings can be demolished. And that part of that looks at building performance and carbon impact calculations. Now, I know that the Deputy's amendment really is focusing on aesthetics, understandably, aesthetic benefit. But one person's, the eye of the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What one person sees as beautiful, somebody else is a sow's ear. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but that, I'm afraid, is the reality. It requires personal judgment. And I think we do have, there is a real risk that if we adopt this now as a criteria within policy GD5 on page 87, that it really could have the effect, and I believe it would, and this is the advice I'm given. If it's just an aesthetic benefit as a test of its own, it has the potential to undermine the whole intent of this policy. And the policy is there for the reasons of sustainability, to reuse, energy conservation, and because all the way throughout the plan, we have sought, and I think there's a long history of this, to move away from the position where buildings were automatically demolished. Get rid of them. I remember, well, you probably all remember, back in the days when we filled west of Albert, we filled La Colette. What happened there? All of our building rubble. Every building we wanted to redevelop got knocked down, and that's where the waste went, and we had to reclaim land as a result of it. We moved away from that. We now have policies that require waste to be managed, and as a result of that, we have recycling of demolition waste by about 40%, which is pretty good, but it's likely to get better. But we need to do that. But of course, we need to take into account in our future policies, carbon emissions and building performance, energy performance. They all should feature in those judgments. And so I think the advice I've had, and of course I am actually quite distant from it now. Once upon a time, I used to have to make planning decisions myself. Nowadays, these things have become so sophisticated. I will need to rely on the judgment of others. But I'm being advised that if we adopt this amendment, there's a significant risk is that we will effectively undermine the effectiveness of the policy, because it will create a degree of subjectivity, whether it's practical from an individual's perspective, and it would leave the policy weak and open to interpretation. So we would have in that case, we'd have no leverage to ensure that any building fabric is retained, apart from listed buildings, of course, that would apply. And also, I think it would be a retrograde step in our journey towards reducing carbon emissions, which are embedded in new development. And I think really the emphasis should be on helping or having a planning processes that works with architects and others, designers, to see how they can use or parts or whole of parts of existing building within their design. So, but that is the advice I'm given. Is while with regret I don't feel comfortable about it. I wish we'd been able a chance to have that discussion, but we haven't. So we need to make a choice today, sir. So the recommendation I'm coming forward with is not to support it. But I do believe we want the same thing, because we have policies on design, and we can make those judgments. There is still scope, no matter what policies we've got. At the end of the day, planning law allows for decisions to depart from the development plan. It's just that if they do, the reasons need to be stated and explicit. So, sorry, sir, I can't support.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I'm speaking in support of the Minister on this one, sir, because whilst I agree, I think Deputy Labby's proposition or proposed amendment is perfectly well intentioned. I do feel he's creating a loophole, especially when there's reference to the aesthetics, a loophole which means that anything will get through. And so, as a member of the Planning Committee also, I'm quite surprised to hear Deputy Labby bring this proposition in this way, because I have seen time and again, in many ways, I guess the opposite of Deputy Labby's experience. But what I see is claims of, we can't just repair and refurbish this. It's far too expensive. It's too difficult. Look, it was built in the 50s or 60s. It needs to be demolished. Need to bring it down. And I hear this time and again. And as a member of the Planning Committee, you don't really have anything to go on. You kind of, that person's a structural engineer or that person's an architect. They know better than me. We'll have to give them permission for this demolition. And I just think it's in this day and age, when we are constrained in terms of materials, when we are trying to inject an element of sustainability into Jersey's overheating construction sector, and a construction sector which is not grasping the opportunities to really build in a sustainable manner. This amendment will just give greater leeway to architects, engineers, developers, to say, just pull it down, we can't do it. And I bring members' attention to, and this is something else I've previously mentioned in the Assembly, to the winners of the 2021 Pritzker Prize, which is the premier international architectural prize. Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal, who won that, part of the reason they won it was because their work was very much focused. They did do new builds, but was very much focused, a large part of their work, on refurbishing buildings that were previously earmarked for demolition. And so, sir, the jury in their citation for that prize, for instance, referred to a 17-storey, 96-unit city housing project that was originally built in the 1960s. It's exactly the sort of thing that you would ordinarily say, you know what, need to bring it down. It's a bit like Cyril Lamarcon House, we just need to bring it down. The architects didn't pull it down. Instead, they increased the interior square footage of every single unit in that building, just by changing the original facade. And they extended the footprint of the building to form bioclimactic balconies, so that once constrained living rooms now extend into new terraces as flexible space, featuring large windows for unrestricted views of the city. Thus, they reimagined not only the aesthetic of social housing, but also the intention and possibilities of such communities within the urban geography. That's all within a single 17-storey early 1960s building. They transformed it. They didn't need to knock it down. Similarly, the jury went on to say that the framework that the architects used transformed 3 other buildings consisting of 530 apartments. The transformation resulted in a dramatic visual reinvention of the social housing complex, the modernisation of elevators and plumbing, and a generous expansion of all units, some nearly doubling in size, without the displacement of any residents, and for 1/3 the cost of demolishing and building anew. Their work solves constraints and problems, finds spaces and creates new uses, and they do it without demolition. And I really fear, this is why I'm surprised that Deputy Labby has brought this, because I fear that the amendment as proposed by Deputy Labby will just open the floodgates, because anything can be justified on aesthetics. Aesthetics are entirely subjective, so sorry, that's a 1960s building, really don't like the way it looks, we need to demolish it. That's what this amendment brings, sir. And so I really do ask members to reject this amendment, as well-intentioned as it may be, because I fear it opens the floodgates to Jersey just going down the road of demolition, rebuild. Not only will that mean vast kind of more building works in Jersey, not only is it not sustainable, but that in itself would push even further the price of building in Jersey, as such projects take longer, they are grander, they are more involved, and so our already limited construction sector would be forced to raise their prices, I have no doubt. So, sir, I'm very much with the Minister on this one and ask members to reject the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Do other members wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, St Peter.
Thank you very much, sir. I was on planning committee with Deputy Labby, and one of the greatest challenges we had was demonstrating that good old talent of common sense. And I think majority of the time when we sat pontificating, normally on site, was looking at some buildings of no real interest, 60s and 70s of very, I don't know, the most fantastic form of, or period of construction in the island, aesthetically. Looking at something where there's built up into a bank, there's so much damp, you literally, the tanking would go on forever to try and fix it. The inefficiencies within the sound and the heat insulation, both between the floors and the outside, it was just ready to go. It was ready to go. And then you combine that with modern methods of construction, and I'm honoured to be on the committee with Deputy Labby looking into this. When you are drifting forward to a world where the aggregates you need or crushed granite you need to build a house in the MMC is now down to 0. Yes, of course, you need some within the foundations. The efficiency, the reduction in labour, the reduction in costs, because they're all obviously built in a factory and shipped in, just makes absolute common sense to be able to allow and look at something and say, yes, this needs replacing. It's had its day. Thank you. Many families have probably lived in it for 30 or 40 years, but it needs a total change. And we use the word subjectivity. Virtually everything on planning committee is subjective at the end of the day. Yes, we have guidelines, but they're subjective. Because if it was 100% prescriptive, which is what we're suggesting here, there'd be no need for the planning committee, because it would be so brutally black and white. No, let's have some common sense here. Let's look at refreshing some of the homes that were lovely for families and their lifestyle. They need changing.
They are not as attractive as they could be. New architecture, great vision. I'm totally supporting the Deputy on this one.
Thank you, Deputy. Do other members wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, Senator Moore.
Just briefly, sir. Interested to follow the Deputy of St Peter, as I would actually beg to differ. I thought he was arguing in favour of the Minister on that one. When we think about common sense, Cyril Lamarcon House does strike me as the obvious one. We have a landfill site, the reclamation site, that is absolutely full at the moment, sir, and the Minister has kindly accepted my Amendment 63, which moves towards a circular economy, sir. So what comes down has to be put somewhere, has to be used for something. And if we are going to move to a proper circular economy where we're minimising waste to improve the outcomes of the future, then it makes absolutely no sense to be demolishing buildings, even if it were to use modern methods of construction to erect something in its place. There are, as Deputy Morrell pointed out, many very aesthetically pleasing ways to improve buildings and make them more modern and relevant to their particular architectural period of the time. But demolishing is something that we really need to move away from. And I think it is one of the worst crimes that this Assembly has committed in allowing the demolition of Cyril Lamarcon House. It should have been made available for housing. We have a housing crisis, and that, for me, is a demonstration of common sense to meet the needs that we have and to remove the need to create waste that is unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Truscott.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to follow. Got a bit of an echo going on there. I don't know if somebody's microphone's still on. The Deputy of St Peter, and we've both served for some time on the Planning Committee, and likewise with Deputy Labby. And for me, what this proposition or amendment brings is just giving the Planning Committee and the planners that little extra latitude to introduce a bit of common sense. I think ideally every time it should be yes. We should see if a building is worth saving, from a carbon footprint and all those things. The latitude that I'm speaking about is that there are so many things when we are considering something like this. And I can think of one instance recently where the gable end of the property had huge cracks in both ends of the gables. There were cracks under the lintels. Water was pouring in the back of the house, and quite frankly, it should have been condemned in the condition that it was. And the proposals going forward in this particular application, it's done and dusted now and put to bed, but the proposals were, in my mind, would have greatly enhanced the landscape and street scene, and would have overall benefited from the likes of modern construction with more modern thermal properties, which, let's face it, going forward, these are essential. So I just think I will be supporting Deputy Labby with this amendment. It just gives that extra latitude for the committee to make a balanced judgment of the best way to progress, rather than being stuck. And it's not all about aesthetics. There are, like I've just said, there are other considerations. In some properties would benefit from a radon barrier inserted and all that type of thing. Very costly. So there's loads of different considerations when we're adjudicating on such applications. So I just think this just makes common sense. It just gives the Planning Committee the ability to be a bit flexible with the rules going forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. No other wishes to speak. I call upon the Deputy to reply.
Thank you, sir. And I'm so pleased that Cyril Lamarcon House came up, because I was saving that for my summing up. This is another thing that annoys me with the policy as it is that government is continually saying, do as we say, not do as we do. It's okay for us to completely demolish Cyril and Marquardt House and rebuild, because we can use the overarching public benefit of having new offices for all the civil service in one place. We're talking here, by the time this policy would come into play, I say to Deputy Morrell, by the time GD5 comes into play, it would have had to be established that there is absolutely no merit to the building that is standing. The Assembly knows me well. I'm absolutely passionate about saving buildings, especially listed buildings, buildings of merit, saving buildings where they can be saved. But by this time this GD5 comes into place, it is established there's no merit in what is standing. It's about how it's replaced or refurbed. And it's not just about the aesthetics, it's about practicalities too, and the potential for perhaps getting 2 units on a site that was 1, if it's appropriate. So we know what the aspiration is, and Senator Moore encapsulated it. Absolutely, we should not be demolishing if we can absolutely help it. And the policy says this loud and clear. But what this does, in articles, I think A and B of it, what this extra article does is, and I thank the Deputy Truscott of St Brelard, because he could have summed this up for me. It gives an open, transparent and honest, common sense ability to the committee to sanction a rare demolition if it is absolutely the best and most practical option. I maintain the proposition, sir, and ask for the appel.
Thank you. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are asked to cast their votes in the chat channel. And I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. Before members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the 82nd Amendment has been adopted, 30 votes for and 11 votes contra. Yes.
Those voting contra, Senators Moore and Mesic, the Connétable of Grouville and St Clement, Deputy Southern, Young, Morrell, Guida, Lehegara, Ayer and Ward.
The next is the 48th Amendment, lodged by Senator Ferguson, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words except that. A. Within policy GD7, the words development of a tall building of over 8 stories within town will only be supported in exceptional circumstances and where the overall benefit to the community will demonstrably outweigh any adverse impacts. Development of a tall building over 8 stories will not be supported outside of town should be deleted and replaced with the following words. Development of a tall building of over 5 stories within town will only be supported in exceptional circumstances and where the overall benefit to the community will demonstrably outweigh any adverse impacts. Development of a tall building over 5 stories will not be supported outside of town. And B, the draft Bridging Island Plan 2021 be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent upon the adoption of A. I think that should have said 2022 to 25.
Yes, that's right. Yes, thank you. Senator Ferguson. Senator Ferguson. Senator Ferguson.
Senator Gorst here. I wonder if we're struggling with Senator Ferguson's technology, because I do know there's been a problem with Wi-Fi and electricity in the west of the island for parts of the day. I know she's there now, sir. I hear her.
I'm sorry, sir. I got lost in the email of the amendment.
Yes. Anyway, we've just called your amendment. So you're going to speak to your amendment, Amendment 48, dealing with tall buildings.
Yes, it's very short, sir. Basically, it's an amendment. Originally, I take no credit for this. It was brought by Deputy Debbie D'Souza of Number 2 District in 2014, where she, spoke against too many high buildings. Now, very high buildings in town make for wind tunnels. And the evidence for this is, for instance, with the recent trio of storms we had last month, where round the town as a whole, the wind speed was something like 55 to 60 miles an hour. But the wind speed round the harbour, where there are a lot of tall buildings, was something like 88 miles an hour. Now, we want town to be somewhere pleasant and people-sized to live. And if we have this, if we insist on pushing people into very tall buildings, then we end up with a lot of wind tunnels, and it makes it more difficult for pensioners to get out and walk around. It makes it difficult for mothers with children. And, if you're if the lifts go out of order, then you've got mothers with children and prams trying to get down, 8, 10, 12 stories. The whole thing makes town, something approaching the Gorbals in Glasgow. And it's just not good enough. I've lived in a town, in a city rather, where they had a lot of tall buildings, and Manhattan in fact, and days where the wind's blowing, it was really quite unpleasant. So, we want to keep town people-sized, we want to make it friendly, and frankly, most of the people, or an awful lot of the people in this States Assembly, live in the country. They've got, nice views of green fields and brown cows, as one previous Chief Minister said. So I really don't feel that, actually sort of cramming people into, into more and more high-rise apartments in town, excuse me, is the answer to this. I think we really do have to consider it more carefully in terms of, making St Helier a pleasant place to live. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Is the amendment seconded? Yes? It's been seconded. Thank you very much. Yes. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Pamplin? No, someone in Deputy Pamplin is chair.
Sir.
Colin Tubb of St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I was just trying to make you aware that my microphone doesn't work. I did try to get your attention before Deputy Labbe, because I would have said something.
Yes.
But
do you want to speak now?
Well, I was just in support of whatever he said, sir. And I did vote for that.
Right, that was the last debate, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Have you got anything you want to say about this amendment?
Not at all, sir.
Well, we're very grateful for that intervention. Does any member wish to speak about this amendment? Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'd hoped that other members would take up the issues. Sir, I think we all want to make sure we avoid having tall buildings out of context and in the wrong place, where they create the kind of horrible environments that the Senator envisages. Earlier on, I think in an earlier debate, we were reminded of the horrible, some of the horrible 1960s and 70s developments in London that I can remember very well. Part of the urban jungle I was brought up in. Actually horrible places. Thankfully, we've learnt from that, and those kind of high-rise blocks. In fact, I worked for Newham when one of them fell down with a gas explosion. I remember that very well indeed. I shouldn't let people lost their lives. Sadly, it's inappropriate. But what it illustrates is the kind of push for tall buildings and system building as something which is frankly, those days are behind us. And these days, you expect architects to recognise that when you create urban environments, you need to create physical environments where people are in a decent place to live. And that means space between buildings and having the right, in the right place. And so that's what the draft plan that we've got today seeks to do. But on the other hand, we have got to, and there's no getting around this, we do need to concentrate, or at least direct most of our development needs, to our built-up areas. And that means using efficient use of land that is already developed. And so I don't think you can sort of dismiss that, let's have a blanket no on the height of buildings. I think it needs to be a much more selective policy than that, because that's what planning's about. You're going to make judgments, and reason. Following on from the last debate, that's why we have planning policies to help them make them judgments, rather than just rely on what we think and our own preferences. We might as well do that, just make it all subjective. But no, we don't. We have firm planning rules and processes to help those judgments. And so what the policies in the plan seeks to do is to set out a range of policy tests to ensure that where a taller building is proposed, it's appropriate in the context. And of course, what we've done with also, there has been a great deal of effort to produce detailed guidance for the town of St Helier. And I'm just trying to find where we've published that. I'm sure we've published it in the island plan. We have published a table drawn from Mr. Miller's character study of St Helier. It's on page 92. That sets out the range. Here we got this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different character areas, all different, where guidance is provided, ranging from areas where single story to 2 stories, 3.5 stories, and then 6 stories in certain areas, and then in the waterfront area. And I think possibly we're going to go on to discuss the amendment, I believe, from Senator Gorst shortly, talking about 8 stories. But of course what we've seen is that I don't know how this happened. I certainly had no hand in it. I think the decisions on the Horizon buildings, which frankly to me, stick well above the general prevailing heights of the building. And I know have come to the shock the people who live in the buildings next door in Castle Quay, who thought that they would be the highest around, and only to find they're sort of trumped, with another set of floors above. And so I think that's where one gets, I think those decisions go back, they're very long, very, very long standing. I don't know when those decisions emanated from. But I think that's an example of the sort of things that if we didn't get this guidance right, we can go wrong. So I don't dismiss the Senator's amendment. I think the point is how do we do this best? And I have to go back, because that's the advice I've given, and I believe it, to trying to have a set of policies that are structured, that provide tests, that got processed, and don't have this situation where we can just make our own judgments because we think we like it. So what do we know about St Helier particularly? Because obviously this is really about the town area. The height of the historic town is around 3 to 3.5 stories. But it is true, the Senator's right, that 20th century additions have grown much taller in places. And we know how people felt about Cyril and Marcon House. I'm not sure how many stories it was. It's 10, was it 10, 11? 9? Was
9.
Thank you very much, Senator. But I seem to remember there were quite large ceiling heights in Cyril and Marcon House. So my guess is that they're probably, the equivalent of a higher than that. But 14 stories in a few locations, and the Esplanade. But what we've seen, of course, in the Esplanade is that 6 to 8 stories has become the norm. And I do think, my own view is that I remember, most of us probably do, when they were all warehouses and low buildings, 2 to 3 stories. When I came to Jersey, that's how it was. But we've seen that develop now into our office district, where they're now predominantly 6 to 8 stories. And I think the island has adjusted to that, actually. I worry about when you get these excrescences start popping up over the top, with air conditioning stuff and all this kind of thing. This is a general push upwards. And somehow or other, I think we need to guard against that. But nonetheless, I think we've learned, the town has learned to accommodate that change. Of course, what we haven't done yet is to provide all the other things that need to go on in the waterfront and Esplanade area to provide the public amenities. We desperately need that to go with tall buildings. And that's a challenge, please, for the next, and one of the things I've done is ask for a planning inquiry on that in the future. And that will help those members that are in office try and achieve that. So I think the Senator's proposition suggests, I believe I understand it right, sets a threshold of 5. It says 5. It says, it says here that anything over 5 stories has to be exceptional. I think that is it is unduly restrictive. And I think really I rely on the planning inspector's judgment on this, where they heard evidence on it. And they said on balance, we think the criteria in the new policy, which is the high buildings policy in the plan, which is GD7, on balance, we think the criteria are adequate to protect the built environment and would not create a blanket carte blanche to develop high buildings as feared by some. The policy accords with the general strategy of the plan to concentrate development in the urban areas and the best use of brownfield lands. Mindful of the problems buildings higher than 4 to 5 stories can create, we consider the policy as reasonable and recommending for adoption as drafted. And I think, sir, that is the advice I'm giving to members. The Senator is right to bring this for discussion. There are, again, all these things are a question of choices. But the work done by the urban character study plainly indicates there is scope for higher buildings in the waterfront area. But again, it's absolutely essential that the spaces in between are human spaces is that they provide the sort of quality of life for people that have lived there, and that needs to be a function of the final design of what is done there. And there should not, in my view, be decisions made on any development until we're clear that that is the case. Thank you, sir. But so I shan't be supporting the amendment, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I will say that I'm going to support Senator Ferguson's amendment. I fully agree with it. I think over the years, in fact, as long as I've lived in Jersey, it's always been said the population increase will be in St Helier. Even the Constable of St Helier has agreed with that wholeheartedly. But there comes a time when enough is enough. And it's one thing saying people are going to come in and we're going to build higher. I'm just looking at the States of Jersey Development Company document where they're talking about the third stage of consultation on what their plans are for the waterfront is now complete. And they said here we go. The design team has responded to comments by reducing the height of the taller corner buildings by 3 stories to a maximum of 8, and bring the gateway building down from 16 stories to a maximum of 12. Now, this body, the States of Jersey Development Company, has almost had carte blanche for what they wanted to do on the waterfront. And if they had their way, it would become, St Helier and the waterfront would become the equivalent of Hong Kong, with tall, high buildings having lots of people there. A 16-story building or even a 12-story building stuck on the edge of St Helier, jutting out above Elizabeth Castle, would be totally inappropriate. In the same way that many of the buildings in St Helier, if they creep up above their existing levels, will change the whole character of St Helier forever. And I really do think, rather than just saying, trust the planners, trust us, we'll decide on the merits of each one, I think we should, at this stage, put a cap on the size of buildings. And so I wholeheartedly agree with Senator Ferguson and say 8 stories is enough. I don't want 12, I certainly don't want 16. If they get away with 1, they'll get away with half a dozen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Conor St Helier.
Thank you, sir, and I'm grateful to Senator Ferguson for the chance to commend Deputy de Souza for her work in the Assembly before she left us, and in particular she revived the flagging St Helier Battle of Flowers Committee, and that's all down to her that's still going on 10 years or so after she left the Assembly. But to get back to tall buildings, and I'm only going to speak once on this subject, the picture Senator Ferguson paints of people struggling down with pushchairs and struggling up to high buildings in wind tunnels isn't really fair. And if it were, I would probably agree with her. It's interesting in particular that the tops of these tall buildings are often the most popular ones for the residents. And I'm actually not thinking about the new ones that are being built on the waterfront. I'm thinking of Convent Court, which has been really well and sensitively refurbished by Andiam Homes. And I'm thinking of talking to pensioners living at the top of that building and loving the views and really enjoying. I know that those flats are really quite popular in our taller units of social housing. As I think we all understand, it isn't really the height of the building that matters. It's what's below. It's how much open space is provided for the community living in that tall building. It's whether there's a really good community centre supporting the residents. It's whether there are shops and other services within easy walking distance. There are, of course, issues around the lifts. Of course, if the lifts don't work properly, if they're not high-speed lifts, if they're not really good, really well maintained, then people can be isolated. But by and large, living in a tall building isn't a bad thing. It can be a really enjoyable experience. Interestingly, Senator Ferguson spoke about the fact that everybody wants to live in the countryside and enjoy looking at cows and I think brown cows in green fields. And actually, ironically, it's the very fact that St Helier has been willing to take the burden, the bulk of the housing needs, that those fields and those cows are there for us to enjoy. And they're not just there for the people to enjoy who happen to live next to them. They're there for the St Helier residents to enjoy when they leave the town to enjoy the countryside and coast that their willingness to live in a high-density environment is making possible. So it isn't really as simple as to say that living in a tall building is a bad thing. Now, Deputy Higgins never misses a chance to have a swipe at the Jersey Development Company, and he didn't let us down today. We have to decide whether we think that his interpretation of what's happening down the waterfront is the right one, or whether what Jersey Development Company have been consulting us about quite a lot is going in the right direction. And I'm not going to make a comment about the height of those buildings at the moment, because that is a matter for another day. He did say that I wholeheartedly support St Helier taking the housing of the island, and I'm afraid that's not entirely correct, because every time I have said, and I just did it now actually, if members were listening, every time I've said that St Helier accepts the housing burden, if you like, that word, I don't myself use it, I always caveat it. I always say there's a quid pro quo that you can't expect St Helier residents to live in more densely environments without providing them with the services they need, the parks, the community facilities, the transport links, and so on. So there's always a caveat, and if there wasn't, then we might be looking at somewhere like the Gorbals, though I confess I haven't been there and I don't want to speak out of turn. It may be a fabulous place. So I think that the island plan, as the Minister has brought forward, is right. It's not being too prescriptive. It's allowing taller buildings where they can be justified. And I don't think that this prescriptive cap being suggested by Senator Ferguson is the way to go, and I won't be supporting it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Conataba St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to use one of Deputy Tudye's favourite words, dichotomy. If we don't build up, we have to build out. It's quite as simple as that. You either increase your height or you increase your footprint. And Jersey is always moaning about the footprint. So surely it makes much more sense to build higher, especially in town. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conataba. Conataba St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. And briefly, because I'm conscious of the time, I just want to draw attention to the fact that by increasing building height, we also have to increase the facilities and the infrastructure to deal with them, particularly with regard to the fire service and emergency services who may not be prepared at this point in time to deal with the higher buildings. So that inclines me to vote in favour of the Senator's proposition. It's in order now to propose the amendment. Adjournment, I mean.
Thank you very much. Is the adjournment seconded? Anyone speak on the adjournment? No? In that case, the Assembly is adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.